Welcome to RotoWire Fantasy Football Live, day 2 of the NFL Draft. Those who joined us yesterday, thank you very much for hanging with us. A lot of people hang. We did the instant reaction. We'll do the same thing for round 2 today. Thinking we don't really get to round 3. We'll see if we have this great rush of energy. But round 2 for sure, we definitely get you covered there. If you get past round 2 and you need player notes, RotoWire has them for you. We got John McConkey. We got Mario Puig writing them up today. You can get a free look at those notes if you go to rotowire.com/Jim. 2-day free trial. No credit card needed. Anthony Cervino, what are you expecting as we go into day 2 of the draft?
I'm expecting a lot of, good energy here. And day 2 to me, after a certain point in round 1, I feel like we're kind of going into the second round anyway because all the elite prospects are gone. So this is almost like an extension of the first round to me.
You're absolutely right. And the way this draft class shakes out, obviously we knew running backs were going to go. There were no first round type running backs, but there are plenty of good players left in this. And defensively, even, we've got a number of good corners. I have like 4 or 5 corners that I think are outstanding. We still got Cooper DeJean and Kool-Aid McKinstry on the board at corner, and interior defensive linemen, Jerzon Newton out of Illinois. So we have a number of players and some offensive guards and some centers. So there's some opportunity, like you said, to make this an extension of the first round with some real impact players. Go ahead, Anthony.
So Dallas, that's my team. That's one of the big teams that really could make noise depending on what they do. They have 1 pick in the second round, 2 picks in the third round. Is there a situation where we maybe see Jerry Jones trade up to grab the best running back on the board, considering that is still a need?
Absolutely. Now, there was buzz, and we never know what these news reports mean, but there was more buzz that Jerry Jones loves him some Jonathan Brooks. Yeah. Played in the state of Texas. But, man, coming off an ACL injury, often NFL teams devalue. But you look at Dallas's pick yesterday. Honestly, that was a lower graded player by many teams, and that's not an abnormal idea for Dallas, right, Anthony? With the pass, what are some of the past picks Dallas? Not who they were, but what types of reaches have Dallas made in the past?
Well, I don't know. I would consider last year they drafted Tyler Smith, and it was a little bit of a head scratcher for people, but very similar to Guyton, where both of these players can play both tackle and guard. And we saw Tyler Smith immediately start in both positions. He opened the year at guard, and then once Tyron Smith got hurt, he had to start games at left tackle, and it worked out. So I think Dallas is looking for these versatile linemen, and especially with Guyton here, just in case Zach Martin gets banged up. He's an all-pro player where you need to, this guy needs to fill in anywhere they have this play. I actually like the move in Guyton.
No doubt. There's no doubt. And like you said, the Dallas line is different than it's been in the past. And you still have to have depth as well. And to accomplish protection for Dak Prescott, whoever the running back is, to get some holes open, that's important. I see Jay Red saying he hopes Edgerrin Cooper goes to the Eagles. Interior lineman. Now, Fletcher Cox is gone. He's retired off into the sunset. Jordan Davis will go into his 3rd year. Maybe not quite what we hoped out of there, but certainly there'll be some thoughts there. We'll see what happens with there. James Bradbury, maybe they do trade him, but I don't know how much of a trade market there is for a plus 30 corner coming off a bad season. Now, sometimes cornerback play isn't sticky year over year, so there's that. But usually after 30, if it's a bad season, it's not like, oh, yeah, you'll bounce back next season. It's more likely than not that you just kind of butched your value. And Bradbury, if I remember right, is under a decent contract. And if you trade a player, there are salary cap ramifications. Go ahead, Anthony.
You bring up Bradbury and what the trade market would be. Last year, Dallas, they traded, I believe, a 5th-round pick for Stephon Gilmore. And that's what they expect. If we did see Bradbury on the move, I would be expecting somewhere like a day 3 pick for him.
Alan Soslowski points out the Bills are going to be making the first pick, and the draft will be starting very, very soon. Remember, we'll have extended coverage of the draft on the RotoWire Sirius XM show, which will be 1 to 3 on Saturday, 1 to 3 on Sunday. We are going all football. I won't be on the shows, but we will have football coverage from our great analysts there, so you could catch it there. Myself and Anthony will be back Sunday morning, 10 Eastern. We will do an overview, the winners and losers of the overall draft. Obviously, you have us here now. The RotoWire site, as I said, there's plenty of information just going up every day, pouring over on the draft. There was an earlier stream that Alan Soslowski set up on RotoWire YouTube, which went over to first round reactions. At some point, go back to that. But all that said, the Bills, they traded back. They're in the second round. They're at the top of it. If you're thinking Buffalo, what do you think they may want to address with the first pick, assuming they keep it in the second round?
Obviously, the big need is wide receiver, but that's not the biggest need on this football team. They lost a lot of defensive players, especially in their defensive backfield. And you brought up earlier, there's a couple of nice defensive backs out there, like Kool-Aid McKinstry. They need to replace Tre'Davious White. So we could potentially see Buffalo come out of here with a cornerback with their first pick in the second round.
And they lost Tre'Davious White, as you said. Ronald Darby wasn't great. Yeah. He played well in a rotation. He's gone. Dane Jackson played very well for them. He's gone. Really, 3 corners are out. They also lost their longtime safety, Jordan Poyer. Yeah. Linebacker Terrell Dodson filled in very well last year. I mean, across the board, run, pass, rush, he's gone. Leonard Floyd is a rotational piece of the pass rush. He's gone. Von Miller looks like his days may be over of having any impact. They pretty much benched him for many parts of games last year. So this is a defense in complete overhaul mode. And as we know, Sean McDermott is a defensive coach. So how important do you think it is for McDermott to have a defense that he can be, at his mind, respectable enough to keep them in games?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And also, how important is it for McDermott to win some football games? Because I don't know how long his leash is in Buffalo right now.
There's no doubt. I know last year we got gas about when he was making the motivational speech using 9/11 as his thing. That was like out there. Yeah. I mean, who does that, right? But they were in a Super Bowl window, but you're right. Little things like that add up. If the football team isn't at the level it's supposed to be, little things like that become a problem. If you're winning, nobody, will fire you over it, because if you're winning, you're winning. But you're right. They have to win some games. And I am very concerned about this team. But the wide receiver room is a big concern as well. We like Khalil Shakir. We like Curtis Samuel. They're both slot guys. They could play outside a little bit, but they are not guys that are going to dominate consistently in the outside. Maybe Shakir surprises us, but they profile of slot guys. And then they brought in Mac Hollins, situational deep threat, 30 years old. I mean, fine. He's better than Gabe Davis. Quite honestly, as a deep ball catcher, Mac Hollins, whenever he's gotten deep passes, remember the Raiders, Las Vegas a couple of years ago, he had targets. He is very physical at the catch point. But again, this isn't a game changer. We're talking about this is a 30-year-old journeyman, right? And we love Dalton Kincaid, but that's another player for the middle of the field. And the more factors they have in the middle of the field, the more defense is going to compress and say, your outside guys can't beat us. If they don't get somebody on the outside who can win, defenses are going to approach Josh Allen very, very differently. I think Adonai Mitchell, I really think they need an X-type receiver, and I know some people have questions about some off-the-field stuff or some health-related things. They need an X. Thoughts?
Yeah. I absolutely agree on this need at wide receiver. You got to go back 2 years ago. Josh Allen was a good quarterback with guys like John Brown and Cole Beasley. Those were his 2 top receivers. Then they go ahead and get Stephon Diggs, and we see the ascension of Josh Allen. Last year, I get Diggs was kind of phased out. Josh Allen rushed for 15 touchdowns. Is that going to happen again? Really, 15 by a quarterback? I don't think we can depend on that. And I also don't know if Josh Allen is going to be able to be the Josh Allen, the thrower of the recent seasons, without a big time weapon. And they don't have that big time weapon. They just don't right now.
And let's not forget, Josh Allen has had elbow and shoulder injuries in the last 2 seasons. He's played through them. He's played reasonably well through them. This is a player that's taken every collision he possibly could in his, 5-6 years in the league. He doesn't miss a collision. So that is a problem. And we've talked on different shows, and I'm not saying this is going to happen to Josh Allen, but we saw Dante Culpepper run over people for 5 or 6 years. All of a sudden, his career was done. We saw Cam Newton supermaning all over people. His career was done. Josh Allen, is he an outlier? He's not bigger and stronger than Culpepper and and Cam Newton were, but he's in that ballpark. But at some point, are the hits going to pile up? Are you worried about that, Anthony?
Yeah, I have to be worried about it just because of the history of how these bigger rushing quarterbacks are. Yeah, they have the size, which means they can take a beating for a couple years longer than your average size quarterback, but eventually it comes to an end.
There's no doubt. We're still waiting. And that is what I'm seeing. The clock has not rolling yet. Joe Bart will certainly be on the back end giving us picks as they come in, and we definitely will keep everybody abreast of those. We did have a comment in the chat about the New York Jets. So the Jets do not have a second round pick. They pick 8th in the 3rd round. I charted through 3. After that, then it just kind of takes a life of its own. But Joe wants to know who's trading back with the Jets today. I wonder what kind of if the Jets are going to be a player at all. They don't really have a lot of ammunition, but at 3rd round pick, that'll be a little later, second half of the evening. Any thoughts on what the Jets may do? They bolster their offensive line. They were very good about that. And the Tyron Smith came in, Morgan Moses a tackle, younger, strong John Simpson, decent guard, Elijah Vera Tucker back, Joe Tippmann. They drafted 45th, I think, overall last year. Rookie growing pains, but maybe not bad. But defensively, this is a strong unit. Is there anywhere the Jets that you think need to go?
I think, a lot of us had Bowers going to the Jets. He's obviously not on the board. Maybe whoever they view as the second best tight end in this draft, but I don't know if you have to move back into the 2nd round to get him, or if a wide receiver they really like falls. But again, when you don't have the assets to trade up, how are they going to make the move?
There's no doubt. Now, the Jets, remember in the draft yesterday, Olu Fashanu, they added him as well. So if Tyron Smith does miss some time, which tends to happen, they at least have another tackle to bring in there. So I love what they do with the line. And, aside from what you said, Anthony, we look at it, we know Mike Williams doesn't typically say healthy. Now, I know last year he tore his ACL, but when you look back at the game logs, I know he exits games early often, but it was a string of 15 and 16 game played seasons. The ACL is supposed to be healed. I don't think he's going to be a target hog here. That could help keep him a little healthier. If he sees 3 targets a game, 4 targets a game as a situational deep threat, just to keep defenses off of Garrett Wilson, to open the box a little bit more for Breece Hall, I think that's all they need from Mike Williams. They don't need him to be the guy in any particular way. Think about it as a really enhanced version of what Alan Lazard was in Green Bay. He'd block a little bit, but he'd get downfield to stretch. Obviously, Williams is way, way, way better than Lazard ever was, but the concept remains the same. Thoughts on that?
I like Mike Williams, but again, versatility has always been an issue. He's not going to get a lot of looks. Like, this offense is going to be dominated by Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. So maybe that's why the Jets felt like, hey, we don't need to go with the receiver or tight end. The biggest issue in recent years has been the offensive line, has been the health of the offensive line. And we have enough pieces on both sides of the ball where if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, we can compete. So if that's how, if the Jets feel like they're comfortable with what they have, and you could protect Aaron Rodgers, keep him healthy and upright, then I think this is going to be a really dangerous football team. So maybe that's why they didn't make that trigger point reaction and get Bowers.
100%. The Jets do have to believe they're in a good spot right now. Yeah. This is a very solid team. Look, they're probably not going to make a run at the Chiefs. It's probably not going to happen. But is there a world where if the Chiefs somehow have something where they're not quite themselves, they have the defense in New York, they have the potential with Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, and Aaron Rodgers to have a terrible good trio, like terrorizing the league. There's a world where the Jets make some noise, and it's not far-fetched. There are a lot of ways things could go really well for them. Now, before we get into the picks, and we know the Bills are going to be coming up fairly soon here, I just want to shout out a couple people. Joe Bartle. Joe Bartle's behind the scenes. Joe has been on TweetDeck getting us picks, I think, often before they're put through. I'm not sure quite, but it seems like on my end before they're coming up on the screens from the sites. Joe is working hard on the back end to feed us these picks. Joe was in it the last probably 2 hours of the show last night, and Joe was just really bringing great analysis. So appreciate the heck out of Joe Bartle, RotoWire teammate. Last night we had Alan Soslowski on the show in the second hour, and Alan is he really is behind everything with our YouTube page, and of course his great Dynasty knowledge. That's it. And of course, Anthony Cervino. Don't forget, Anthony Cervino and I, we do a live show on RotoWire, and right now it's Twitter, RotoWire Twitter, and right now, Mondays and Fridays are when we typically are on. But once we get into the NFL preseason, we will be going 5 days a week, one way or the other, whatever days of the week the shows are. But remember to keep posted on that. And we eventually will be opening a RotoWire fantasy football channel. When we do that, we will announce that as well. Go ahead, Anthony. Any thoughts on the upcoming material we have?
No, really excited for this upcoming season. Really excited to, broadcast on YouTube and all these other outlets. And really, if you haven't used the RotoWire Advanced Statistics, it's subscription based. You can see there's a code on the screen to get a couple of days. I think it's 2 days free. Go ahead and use it. These are outstanding, stats that you can get your hands on. I know Jim uses them. I use them. The entire RotoWire team uses them. If you're a DFS player, the DFS projections, there's sports betting projections as well. And you get all of that for one low price, but you can try it out for free for 2 days. Jim, what is that code, by the way?
Oh, RotoWire.com/Jim. Go to that. There's one on the screen. It'll work too. I always using my own code so they can chart it over to me. I'm selfish like that. Say, hey, Jim's actually doing some work for once. So let's find out if he's actually doing something here. Now, Joe Bartle mentioned the Bills. You see on the screen, the Bills are staying at 33. They are on the clock right now. The clock has started. The Pats seem they could be poised to trade out of 34. So we'll be keeping our eyes open on that. One last thing, and I'm not going to sit here and pitch RotoWire all night it'd be nice, but I'm not going to do that. But our tech team, the tech people we have. This is why the tools on RotoWire are so good. We have full-time, high-level tech people, and it's a lot of them. It's a big team, and that tech team gives you a lot of advantages that other sites simply do not have. That's a great benefit of being with RotoWire. Okay, so all that said, we've already talked about Buffalo. They could go a lot of different ways with this pick. They are on the clock. Joe Bartle will let us know when that does come down. But they could go defense for Sean McDermott and a team that's really been overhauled and lost players. They need a dominant outside receiver. They could go that route. The offensive line is in good shape. They for the first time in a while, this is one of the better lines the Bills have had. Certainly, they're not worrying about quarterback for a long while, so they're fine there. So it's going to be, it's like I said, it's defense or it's receiver in my mind. Do you see it any differently?
No, it's going to be one of those two spots.
Yeah, and in terms of trades, when the Patriots come on the clock, again, this is a team that needs a lot. But I'm telling you, if they're at second and trading out at 2, that's a tough one. They just bring in a new, in their mind, franchise quarterback. They have Kendrick Bourne off an ACL. He's nearing 30. KJ Osborne's a great blocker, decent receiver. They have a nice slot player in Demario Douglas, and they have Hunter Henry, who's 30 on a 3-year deal. If you're going to bring in this quarterback, how do you not, if you don't have a wide receiver on your board ranked as somebody that could be a difference maker, how do you not give your young quarterback that, Anthony?
I've been hypercritical about New England bringing in a quarterback with the type of skill position.
Joe Bartle lets us know Keon Coleman, the wide receiver, goes to the Bills at pick 33. Anthony, they went with the receiver. We were very hopeful they would do that. Keon Coleman is very, very heavily rated by some. When I graded him out, I saw him out of Florida State as a possession receiver. I didn't see him as that alpha type receiver, the one who was going to command heavy presence from the defense. All that said, many people thought super highly of Keon Coleman, but the Bills have a receiver, Anthony.
Yeah, not the greatest speed, but can play the slot, can play the outside, big physical receiver, as you said. And if you look at the other receivers on the Bills, like your Curtis Samuel, I feel like there's a bunch of slot receivers there where I think Keon Coleman will be more of an outside presence for Josh Allen.
He's 6'3", 213. So in terms of eating up space, There's that. Didn't test, so we don't know what the measurables are. And we do pay attention to measurables. I know some people say it's the underwear Olympics, but the league tests these things for a reason, especially the agility and the explosiveness drills. It teaches us a lot. But Coleman has good hands, and he's very physical. So that's a positive as well, because Josh Allen will stick the ball in there. And the 50-50 balls are more like 75-25 balls. So for Keon Coleman, that is a very important part of his game. He doesn't separate. And that's why I don't see him as an X. He doesn't get that natural separation. He's counting on winning the 50-50, the contested. He's not going to create his own space. Agility, not really there. This is a straight line guy. And so, when I say a Z, there's a stretch Z too. And the stretch Z is one that not just gets possession routes, but also with that straight line, you can get downfield with that and use that big body. So it is not exactly an X, but it is a physical presence. And I do think, again, maybe they have their issues with Mitchell. I think teams do. They let him slide. Maybe Keon Coleman for what Josh Allen needs. Maybe that's the next best thing, Anthony.
Yeah, and listen, anything that they brought in was going to be an upgrade in his current wide receiver room. But I like the fact that he's a bigger bodied guy. I think they needed that outside of Dalton Kincaid, who's their tight end, and he's going to be a nice complement to guys like Shakir and Curtis Samuel.
So in terms of fantasy value, we were looking at Khalil Shakir at a point being the number one. Khalil Shakir said he played about 70-ish% slot last year. Samuel's always played about 70% slot. And we now have a clear outside receiver. Is this a target drag on Khalil Shakir for what we thought? And I have to get the sunlight off my face. So you go ahead and talk. I can hear you.
We're used to Stephon Diggs dominating targets in this offense for Buffalo. I don't think in any world Keon Coleman steps in and sees the Stephon Diggs type volume. But considering, barring any type of weird setbacks or injuries, I expect this kid to play early and often. And from a fantasy football perspective, I think he's worth taking in the double-digit rounds.
I do as well. Because the Bills, again, we talk about they lost so much on defense. Part of the problem with all their losses on defense are very simple. They're probably going to have to score more points than they have scored in the past. James Cook right now has no real depth behind him. We got Ty Johnson, I think Darrington Evans. Ty Johnson's a nice little scat back. I give him that. But outside of that, if they overwork James Cook and he ends up missing time, that is going to be a massive problem. They're going to have to use those receivers. And so I do think Keon Coleman in a PPR league, I could see him catching 70 to 75 passes. Like you said, double-digit rounds for that. Is 70, 75 sound reasonable?
Reasonable, but do you see a world where, this is going to be the new Josh Allen favorite target or new Josh Allen receiver? Do you see a world where he's overdrafted to the point where, hey, maybe he's too expensive for our blood?
Yes, because there were many draft analysts that were super excited about Keon Coleman, and I think they saw him as a potential alpha. And I didn't quite see him that. I think they're missing the lateral agility and the separation. I think that precludes him from being that. But there are analysts that believe he's the deal. So based on that, Anthony, you're right. I think there are going to be people, I may not know. I may say there may be seventh round buzz that will go with that. Now, Joe Bartle breaks in some news here. We don't have a pick in. The Chargers trade up with the Patriots.
Wow.
So, yes. So that is going to be interesting. I'm trying to see where the Patriots are. Joe will certainly tell us when we know where the Patriots are at, but I don't see them on this list here. So we'll have to see. But right now, we have the Chargers. According to ESPN site, they're picking 2 and 5, but maybe the Patriots got that fifth pick. My guess is they traded down a few spots. So the Chargers, when we look at their draft.
Yeah, it was a pick swap. I'm not sure the other compensation, but I have it on my screen now where Patriots are back to pick 5 in the second round.
So that's smart for the Patriots. Only 3 picks back. They probably could still get whoever they were looking for, more likely than not, but they'll get other compensation to build their team. The Chargers started out drafting Joe Alt yesterday. This is a team, defensively, it's not great. They have some stars, but this is a really hit or miss defensive roster. The offensive line, they have great tackles potentially now. There's, I think, Corey Linsley. I think they re-upped him on a deal on the interior. So I don't know how much you're going to go after the line. but their receiver room. And I know they're not going to pass a lot. I know. Oh, we got the pick in. Let me get Joe here. And telling us Ladd McConkey goes to the Chargers at 34. Now, Ladd McConkey is a player, injury concerns for sure. He's not a tiny guy. He's 6 foot. He can't. I see him as a slot. He played a lot of outside of Georgia. He gets open in a nanosecond. So obviously he will serve as a possession guy. He will be a dream against zone defense. You hear me? I know I carry on too much about the zones, but that's the league. And we see if you can navigate the slot and get open quickly. And the quarterback has a spot to get it out to. Keenan Allen is gone. And we saw what Keenan Allen, and I'm not comparing Ladd McConkey to Keenan Allen, but we saw Keenan Allen, how well he worked with somebody that can get insane separation quickly. And Ladd McConkey, again, not Keenan Allen, but based on what we saw, he can get separation. And like Keenan Allen, he can play outside or inside. So we know they want to run. They may not be successful running the ball. They may be forced to throw a whole lot more than they actually want to. Thoughts on McConkey going to the Chargers?
This tells me that after the Chargers saw that Buffalo didn't take McConkey, they picked up the phone, made the move. It tells me they wanted McConkey. They targeted him. I absolutely love this, and I love this because there was such a dire need. I actually liked Buffalo's receivers before Coleman better than I liked the Chargers receivers before they made this pick. So that tells you everything you have to know about, how poor this receiving room was for Los Angeles. And you look at Ladd McConkey, look at the quarterback now. I get that it's not going to be a high volume passing team, but I think Ladd McConkey, there's a legitimate shot that he can lead this team in wide receiver targets.
Yes, because Josh Palmer, he's a nice player, and he can do a number of nice things. He can get downfield a little bit. He can get underneath some, but a lot of injuries last year. Missed some significant time. And Quentin Johnson, do we really have to go over this again? He has to make a massive improvement to be a factor. Their number 3 was Darius Davis. And at tight end, it's like we got Will Dissly, we got Hayden Hurst, we got Donald Parham. Look, McConkey would be super heavily targeted. And again, I'm not comparing him to Keenan Allen. Understand it. But Keenan Allen was seeing like over 10 targets a game because Justin Herbert had to get the ball out to somebody. And he realized whoever got open quick was getting the ball. Of the receivers on this team, McConkey is the one who has the ability to get open quickly. And I do think McConkey is definitely going to function heavily in the slot, but in 2 receiver sets. I have to think from day one, right now, he has to have a leg up on Quentin Johnson, who is horrific as a rookie.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I didn't like Quentin Johnston coming out, and he obviously, proved me right in year 1. Sure, anything can happen. He can make some type of improvement, but I think he's a lot closer to, Denzel Mims than he is to Jordan Addison.
So right now I have Justin Herbert just outside the top 12 quarterbacks. And although I like Ladd McConkey, this is not enough for me to move Justin Herbert out of that. This is a nice possession receiver who will get him a lot of catches. But I think this offense really lacks a consistent explosive element. Greg Roman running the offense, that does not breed a lot of confidence for me. Even the backfield right now, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, away from Lamar Jackson. And I'm going to repeat, when you have Lamar Jackson, that RPO-heavy quarterback creates lanes for running backs that the common quarterbacks don't. Not that Herbert's common, but in terms of mobility, he's a decent runner, but he's not an RPO guy. So Gus Edwards was a career low by like a yard in yards per carry last year. And that was not a good sign. He's 28. And so Edwards may be way closer to the end than we think. So this team could be in trouble here. Joe Bartolo tells us the Falcons traded up with the Cardinals. So the Falcons will be picking the 3rd pick of the 2nd round. Now, yesterday, the Atlanta Falcons surprised everybody, including Kirk Cousins, by taking Michael Penix Jr. as their quarterback. Now, repeating this, Kirk Cousins was told ahead of time the team was planning on taking a quarterback in the later rounds. It ended up being the 1st round because apparently it was their guy. So what could the Falcons do now that they're set up to pick 3rd in the 2nd round?
You would have to assume Atlanta's going defense. That's what I thought they were doing when they were going to pick Penix. What Atlanta does have going in their favor, that this has been such an offensive-heavy draft, that there's some nice defensive talent still on the board.
Absolutely. And like we said, we did think they go defense yesterday. But again, quarterback position is the most important position in professional sports. If Kirk Cousins were to get hurt, or if it's a developmental thing, there are lots of reasons why it's hard to criticize an NFL team for taking a quarterback who they believe might be something. But like you said, this really does need to be a defensive pick. So we have time while we're waiting for this pick to go back to the Chargers. Did you agree that Justin Herbert doesn't move up the fantasy ranks because of Ladd McConkey?
I agree, and the reason why I agree is Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. And then in terms of the other receivers, so Joshua Palmer is obviously not even related to the way that McConkey plays, but in this offense, how are we valuing Josh Palmer coming off an injury-plagued season? We've seen in his time on the field, he can extrapolate a season out to be like 1,000-yard type guy, but are we buying into any of that?
No, he's a no-frill. He needs volume to return fantasy value. He needs a lot of it's almost like he's a poor man's Deontay Johnson.
Oh, oh, that's rough. A poor man's but I love it. But it's correct. It's definitely correct. And here, I think we're gonna have a pick here. Let's see what we got here. Points on. I'll put this on the screen. Rook, and the name's always a tough one for me. Orin Borro goes to the Falcons, defensive tackle, and they gave him a third-round pick in this deal. So that said, they do have some interior defensive line help. There are a number of places the Falcons could have used help. Now, remember, last year the Falcons brought in a number of defenders. Some of them were from the Saints, actually, but they brought in a number of defenders. Some of them worked. Some of them transitioning to the defense didn't quite take. But sometimes those moves take 2 years to take effect. And so now adding another defensive piece, if they could get Caden Ellis has a better season at linebacker for them, if they could put together some pieces, this defense could be, and I'm going to say average, which isn't bad. Thoughts on the Falcons?
Defensive need addressed. I'm in on it. I think despite the whole Penix thing, I am very much in on the Atlanta Falcons. This offense, in theory, should be a juggernaut. If you look at all the pieces they've compiled through the years in the early first round, all the skill position players, they finally got the quarterback and the offensive mind to put it all together. This defense, can it be middle of the pack? And if it gets to middle of the pack, that's probably good enough, if the offense performs the way I think it will, to win that division.
I'm looking through the draft before we go back to the point at hand with the Falcons. And we're looking through this. So the Falcons picked the Commanders are going to be on the clock. New England had traded up. Then we have Tennessee. Carolina had a trade, and then we're going to be on Washington again. So there's a bunch of teams that have made trades. They're going to be moving through here, and then we're finally going to get the Cardinals back in at 11. But there's a bunch of teams that had made trades. So there's a bunch of teams that really made action. Matter of fact, when I'm looking at the board of the first 13 picks in the second round, 10 of those 13 are based on trades that were made. So talk about activity. Now, some of this activity is done before tonight, but regardless, that's a lot of activity. And Anthony Cervino pointed out earlier how teams would treat the beginning of the second round like the first round. And I think teams trying to get action to that point has proved that out. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, I thought the early first round was going to be a lot busier, but now we're starting to see that fallout here where teams are going to be wheeling and dealing. There's a lot of value still left on the board, and I can see a lot of defensive players starting to go in the second round.
Absolutely, because last night, remember, the first 14 picks were offensive players. We did see a little correction in the second half. Go ahead, Anthony.
I said, what a different world the NFL is in 2024.
It was interesting because we did see the 6 receivers. I think it was 7. It may have been 7. 6 or 7 receivers went. 6 quarterbacks went. It was a really good offensive tackle class. And offensive tackle, obviously, we know the premium that is placed on that position. And that really drove things. But like you said, the comeuppance, there will be defense. And we started to see that. And But in the second round, I should say, 1 and 3 picks has been defensive. But like you said, there could be a run coming. So we are on the Washington Commanders pick. They're going to pick 4th and 8th in this round. And we know they took Jaden Daniels yesterday. In the backfield, Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, Chris Rodriguez backs him up as the number 3. The receivers, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson. Then it really falls to De'Ami Brown, Jamison Crowder. I've talked on and on about Zach Ertz. I loved Zach Ertz forever. He couldn't run the last year before the ACL. He was 5th percentile yards after catch. Obviously, back from the ACL, he was 1st percentile, the absolute worst yards after the catch. You said he could provide maybe some possession type stuff. But if you're going to bank on Jaden Daniels, do the Commanders need to do something offensively, even if it's offensive line, or do they need to do something with the tight end if they're this kind of high for that? So what are your thoughts?
I think about Dan Quinn. He's a defensive guy, and this defense under Rivera was not good. I believe they traded, Chase Young and Sweat, I believe, last year. I think this is going to be a defensive pick. Dan Quinn needs some help on that side of the ball. Would not shock me whatsoever to see Cooper DeJean go here.
Oh, yeah, the cornerback would be a very strong play. Last year, they busted on Emmanuel Forbes. Now, you never know. A young rookie corner could turn the corner and do a little bit better. But as we talked this through, Joe Barlow is going to set us up for more success. Go defense. Like you said, Dan Quinn, defensive tackle, Johnny Newton at 36. So Illinois defensive tackle, that's a big deal. Jerzon Newton, some call him, but Johnny is the other name he goes by, more familiar. I had him as my number 1 defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman. And when Ruka Rankro, I can't get that name right, from Clemson, I had him as a 3rd round pick that he went earlier to the Falcons. Now they're smarter than me. All right, so let's get that out of the way. But I do think that the Commanders do get themselves a very serious interior lineman to really allow Dan Quinn to make some of his pressure schemes work up better. Thoughts on the addition to the defense?
This really impacts the front 7 now. They made a couple free agents additions like Dorrance Armstrong from my Dallas Cowboys. Nice rotational player. He's probably going to be a starter now. Cleveland Farrell never really worked up to the draft capital that Raiders paid for him years ago, but he's going to be a nice piece here. They brought in Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu. So this defense is going to be a work in progress, but Dan Quinn's starting to build, and I'm a Dan Quinn guy. I know the defense fell apart for my Cowboys last year, but I'm kind of bullish on what this team, or at least defensively, what this team's going to look like.
We'll probably get back to the offensive side of pick 8. There's a decent chance that Washington comes up and makes a offensive move here. But I'm still nervous about Cliff Kingsbury being the offensive coordinator. In my mind, there was nothing impressive about his time in Arizona. Now, I know when he first came in the league, it was all about the air raid, and they didn't have the personnel for it. They were running all these verticals, but they didn't have guys that could win, and so that got cooked. Well, Kingsbury did try to go with more 2 tight end sets. So it was he really would go from 5 receivers all the way down to 3 at times, sometimes down to 2. So he did make adjustments there. But the play calling, there was never anything creative about his play calling. It was Kyler Murray breaking contain and making plays happen. So there was definitely that. But other than that, New England Patriots have taken Jaylen Polk, wide receiver, at pick 37. So look, we talked about this earlier when the Patriots were on the clock, but they traded. We knew that they needed, if they draft that quarterback, 1st round, Drake May, 3rd pick. Right now, we said Kendrick Bourne. We said KJ Osborne, Demario Douglas, nice slot, Hunter Henry. You got to give the kid a weapon. And so they do make the move. They add a receiver. I do see Jaylen Polk, again, a little more of a possession receiver, but they need that. Thoughts on the Patriots going receiver?
No shock here. We talked about it earlier. You got to go get your new quarterback weapons. Now, there are some nice receivers still on the board, like Adonai Mitchell, but they see something in Polk here. And of course, Polk comes from Washington, played with Penix, so there could be some juice here. Again, I don't know if I would have made that decision, but hopefully, like you said, they're smarter than I am.
So Polk is 6'1", 203. And now the good news is Bill Belichick's not there because we know their history of drafting receivers under him. Jaylen Polk, though, at 203, ran an 11th percentile 40. That's super slow. If you were 225, all right, we can give you that. But at 203, it's not like a heavy receiver. Explosiveness, he tested just above average of the 60th percentile. So that's your get off the blocks. Those are your jump drills. And so realistic of an athletic profile, it's not great. But he's a short area player, very explosive at short area. He didn't test for agility, maybe allowing his tape to do the talking. He does have good hands, so that's very useful as well. And he can fight off defenders well with his hands. He did show that, but he's slow. And that's an issue. He's slow. But at this point, Drake May at least get somebody reliable with good hands to get the ball to. Now, this guy isn't sharp in and out of his breaks. A little worried about that. It's, to me, again, it's an ultimate possession receiver. So useful, and maybe there's not a receiver on the board. They saw somebody who was a little more explosive. Thought Troy Franklin of Oregon could have been an idea for that. They wanted a little bit more. You're getting sick of us hearing about AD Mitchell. Clearly, he's fallen off the board for a reason. Fine enough. But that said, in terms of fantasy, what are you thinking about Jaylen Polk as a rookie?
Probably out, right? Like, we're not very impressed with this wide receiver room, but is he the type of prospect that's going to go immediately start over Juju or Kendrick Bourne? Like, there's a shot, but I don't know. I get Belichick's not here, but like Gerard Mayo spent a lot of time under Bill Belichick, and I think he's still going to adopt a lot of the same philosophies. So it makes me worried about the rookie wideout.
Yeah, and those philosophies are really nice when you have Tom Brady. Tom Brady.
KJ Osborne, good blocker.
Right. And Kendrick Bourne, and the concern with Kendrick Bourne is he did play good football while he was with the Patriots, but that coaching staff is gone. They utilize him extremely well. Like you said, maybe Mayo, though he's a defensive coach, maybe he did learn and could, communicate to his staff how Bourne is. But again, Bourne is nearing 30, often mid-season ACL, but he did at a per game basis. He was playing quite well. Yeah. But again, he's not a guy you could build an offense around. And that's the thing right now. There is nobody from a pass catching standpoint to build things around. Now, maybe that takes a little heat off of Ramondre Stevenson. Just adding another body to the receiving room, just giving the defense a little bit more to keep them honest, so to speak, could help him a bit. I still think that Antonio Gibson could filter in as a receiving back. And I know a lot of people gave up on him, and I understand a new start might be good, but Drake May is going to be under some heat. And when he is, if they're in their hurry up package, and if Gibson is able to secure a role there, he could see quite a few receptions in that role. Is he a world beater? No. But remember, Antonio Gibson was a college receiver at Memphis, and we saw the flashes when they used him that way in Washington. I remember this downfield corner route he ran. It was just like a thing of beauty, but he can't play. Joe Bartle is pointing out, while we wait and the dust has settled, conventional dynasty has Jaden Daniels as a better fantasy asset over Drake May. What are your thoughts, Anthony Cervino, about the dynasty value of Jaden Daniels versus Drake May?
I don't know if it's close, because I like what Washington has around Daniels more than I like what the Patriots have around May. Plus, I like the rushing floor. And I like, again, I'm more of a Cliff Kingsbury guy than you are, but I think about those early Kyler years. I know they do a lot of damage as an NFL team, but Kyler was a game-changing quarterback under Kingsbury. And I get Kyler did a lot of improv, but so could Jaden Daniels.
And maybe when you talk about Kyler Murray, just remember the DeAndre Hopkins play. That's all I got to say. It was against Buffalo, right?
I think so.
And he rolled out, and it was like 100%. Those two guys, Cliff Kingsbury, and again, and I get it, you like him, and I respect that because I respect you as a football analyst. But honestly, Kyler Murray was bailing out people right now. But that said, maybe Kingsbury better than I think. Let's keep our mind open. You saw things you liked, so let's look at that way. Now, the other thing I will say about Jaden Daniels, the concern, yes, he can run, and I do have him ahead of Drake May as a dynasty quarterback as well, like you, Anthony. But 210 pounds, and that's, if you're going to run, you better be able to get down and avoid contact, because if you don't, those big hits will pile up quickly. And again, I made this comp. In a way, it's a lazy comp. I'm not saying he's this player, but I just remember when Robert Griffin came in the league. And back then in 2012, I wasn't as cognizant about weight and holding up. And he just never had a chance. He was a small dude running and just taking hits. And it very quickly derailed his career. Now, I'm not saying it's happened to Jaden Daniels. If he's able to figure out how to avoid the big hits, just get down quickly, get out of bounds if you have to. But that's going to be the break point for him as to what he's able to do. Thoughts?
Yeah, size is a concern, but size has been a concern with prospects. Drew Brees was undersized. Kyler was undersized. Obviously, Bryce Young is undersized, and it hasn't really worked out well for him. So I do think it can go either way. I guess my question is, can Jaden Daniels learn to protect his body a little bit better than RG3 if you're making that comp?
Remember, Drew Brees was a pocket quarterback. There's another quarterback you mentioned who's a pocket quarterback, but I'm missing the names that you mentioned. But the mobile ones, that's like Bryce Young. He runs a little bit, but if you're just a pure runner, it's a little bit different. But Kyler Murray, remember, 2 16-game seasons, then a 14, an 11, and an 8. It didn't take long for him to start missing time. Bartle tells us the Tennessee Titans are taking Texas defensive tackle Vondre Sweat at 38. This Titans team, they are really building something here. They pick up L'Jarius Sneed, Calvin Ridley at receiver, Tony Pollard, Lloyd Cushenberry at center. But back to defense, they had Sneed. Chidobe Awuzie is not what he was. Last year, he was recovering from an ACL, but he's been a good corner. It's possible. Sebastian Joseph Day, nothing big deal on the defensive tackle. Kenneth Murray was kind of a bust at linebacker, but they have added some pieces, and they didn't really lose a lot. Sean Murphy-Bunting did not play well at corner last year for them. So basically, they've added a few really good pieces on defense, and now they're going defensive tackle. Because remember, Teair Tart had been there. He was asking for money. He was a great run stopper, and then they let him go. Well, they still have Jeffrey Simmons, and now I think the replacement for Teair Tart is T'Vondre Sweat. Go ahead.
I like what the Tennessee Titans are building, and it started with the Brian Callahan addition at head coach, and I think they won free agency, and so far early first 2 days in the NFL draft, they're certainly winning the NFL draft. You mentioned not only offensively, but what they're doing on the defense on top of this day 2 edition. They brought guys in like Sebastian Day, Kenneth Murray, Sneed. This team, right? Last year, the AFC South was an afterthought. This could be one of the more surprisingly competitive divisions in the NFL.
It will be very fun to watch, but man, those Houston Texans, that's going to be a thing of beauty this year. But you're right. The competition has stepped up. With the Texans, last year, their head coach was a defensive-minded head coach in his first year. The system was never going to work in year one, right? And they brought in some talent. And DeMeco Ryans has a chance of building something here, right? And so I am very excited for that. But like you said, there's a lot of uncertainty. But in the offseason, the Texans, they had Danielle Hunter. They lost a lot of people. Don't get me wrong. Danico Autry, average edge. Foley Fodukasi for the defensive tackle. I'm not worried about Jeff Okudah or Mike Ford. Neither are any good at corner at this point. But yeah, they did lose a lot of players, Anthony. They lost Blake Cashman, who was a great linebacker. Yeah. Jonathan Greenard actually was probably better than Danielle Hunter at this point. Danielle Hunter's aging. Yeah. Greenard was in his prime. Tavier Thomas had showed at times to be a great slot corner. Sheldon Rankins, Malik Collins, Denzel Perryman. So you're right. Now, when I think back this through, they lost a lot of important defensive pieces. So they're going to have to win via the shootout. Joe Bartle tells us the Rams are trading up with the Panthers at pick 39. We mentioned the Texans quickly. Go ahead and make a counterpoint to that. The defense lost a lot of people. What are your thoughts?
On Houston? Yeah. Now, I'm not as worried as you are because they also brought in some people. But when I think about this AFC South, Tennessee's an up-and-coming team. I do think Jacksonville bounces back here. So I don't know if it's just a one-team race with Houston. I think it might be a little bit close. And I don't talk about Indy. There's 4 teams that could be very good.
Absolutely. And when we look at Indy, Shane Steichen for what he can do with an offense. With Gardner Minshew, he had that team competitive offensively. And that was with Jonathan Taylor missing a little while and then missing time late and not being quite himself for a while. There is a lot that can go right with Shane Steichen calling the offense. So it's very exciting. So the Rams are on the clock here. Rams, they have a lot of needs. There's no question. But in terms of what the Rams are going to do, is there any, which is we're a fantasy football show here, is there any thought to them going offense? In the first round, they did take Jared Verse, the edge rusher. So they definitely worked on that. Are they going offense or are they going to keep going defense here?
Is there an outside shot where they potentially target a wide receiver? And I say that because Cooper Kupp is he's getting beat up. He's a little bit older. Is there a guy that Sean McVay loves, or are they going to surprise us and potentially take it almost like an heir apparent to Stafford? Somebody like Rattler.
Oh, that would be interesting because I personally, and I could be way off on this. Of course, I was way off yesterday. I thought Bo Nix and Michael Penix were not first-round picks. Clearly, they were top 10 picks. So there's that, right? But there's a chance, and I know they're saying Colby Parkinson, but they can't be thrilled at him. Tyler Higbee's 30, coming off a January ACL injury in that playoff game against Detroit. The tight end isn't the most featured part of that offense. But if McVay got somebody that he thought he could deploy a little differently, don't be surprised. Sean McVay, the beauty of his coaching is that he evolves. Again, the downhill running situation last year, building in another receiver beside Cooper Kupp. He made Demarcus Robinson relevant for the last 6 games of the season. Yeah. And that was another one of those insane feats. The Rams continued to address the defense. Yesterday, they added Jared Verse, the edge. Today, they go from pick 52 to 39. Thank you, Joe Bartle. And they select defensive tackle Braden Fiske.
Okay, so it looks like they have they're trying to build around the loss of Aaron Donald. For years, we've seen Les Snead, expend his draft picks, right? Where he was moving his picks for guys that can help him win now. I think this is an opportunity where this team can get younger, get a little bit less expensive at some positions. And I like what they're doing. Offensively, as long as Matthew Stafford's healthy, this offense is going to move. But you also need to be able to stop people, right? There were some games last year that the Rams should have won where their defense let them down.
100%. And we mentioned the Rams had some young players that played reasonably well, but it was the gravitational pull of Aaron Donald that helped them see less attention. But now they're going to go with the volume approach, put together a number of good players. This defense could get built up a little more quickly than we thought. They did hit on some draft picks. For the few draft picks they had, they do have some hits, which is very impressive for that organization. Again, this is the first time they had a first-round pick in a long time, right? Oh, my goodness. Now, Joe Bartle points out the Panthers got the second-round pick next year by dealing with the Rams. So that's a nice little haul for them to be able to get another pick next year. Currently, they should have the 20th pick, the Panthers, in this round, but then they're also going to be able to come back next year with a second. And the pick that they anyway, Joe's talking about the pick from the Brian Burns deal. The pick they traded, the one that the Rams got, was the trade pick they acquired from the Brian Burns, New York Giants, correct?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So thank you for the intel on that, Joe Bartle. Again, hats off to Joe Bartle. He's doing yeoman's work, helping the guys in the RotoWire site with the news items, also helping us when picks come out so we can kind of get ahead of the game here. So nothing offensively for the Rams here. So there's not much on the fantasy angle to talk about at this point. 2 defensive ads. But really what that does is if this defense can be good enough, the Rams are happy to be able to go with a very balanced offense. We saw it last year. The defense played well enough. They didn't have Matthew Stafford throwing 40 times a game. There were games he needed to, but definitely the game plan called for a balanced attack. And I think that really plays into it. Before we get into that, Joe Bartle says another trade. The Eagles have moved in. They traded with Washington. And earlier in the chat, way early, I think Jay Red may have said something. I'm trying to think of who said this trade. Maybe it was Joe Farrell, but somebody pointed out that there was going to be a trade. And those teams, I think, were brought up. So I think that was pretty cool. I'm sorry I didn't have a better answer, but it's, a whole lot of stuff shaking here. So, all right, backing up, we kind of are, the Rams can run that balanced attack. The better their defense gets, the less reliant they'll be on being one-dimensional. Overall, the skill position players they have are going to continue to be able to play at a high level because this offense should continue to be hot. Thoughts?
Yeah, again, offensively, there's a case to be made where they potentially go receiver at some point, but I like what they have. The only way, maybe to replace Cooper Kupp eventually. But, when I look at this defense, I'm not very impressed. They need a lot of work. They even brought back Darius Williams, who he was on their Super Bowl team, left for a few years. They had to bring him back. They signed Tre'Davious White, who's probably not the same guy as he was when he was playing all-pro football in Buffalo. So this does not shock me at all to see the Rams heavily.
Joe Bartle has our back again. The Eagles traded up one pick in front of the Packers, and they took Cooper DeJean. Now, yesterday, it was Quinyon Mitchell, who I thought was probably the best outside corner in the draft. We have versatility with Cooper DeJean, who can play outside or inside. Are you frustrated or do you not feel well?
As a Cowboys fan, it is very frustrating.
Oh my gosh. This is big for the Eagles because, all right, we saw last year, we mentioned this earlier, we saw Darius Slay and James Bradberry, both aging players. They both kind of fell off significantly last year. Slay may not have fallen quite as far as Bradberry, but what I could see here is now Cooper DeJean's versatile. He could play the slot. They could move him to safety. They could move him around. We're not sure quite where he's going to play. But I think Darius Slay, if he comes in as a number 2 to Quinyon Mitchell, I think there's something to be had there. And another thing, and I don't know if this is possible, but we have seen some older cornerbacks transition to safety. James Bradberry, he's a bigger guy as the corners go, right? And I could see a world if he's able to make that switch to move him to safety. He would be a better safety than a corner at this point. His responsibilities would be way different. Thoughts?
Howie Roseman, it seems like he's playing chess while the rest of the league is playing checkers with how he runs his football team, whether it's with contracts or drafting. We've kind of been hypercritical on this Eagles defense. Right? They're going to have to outscore everybody. Now, you go into this draft first 2 days, they've completely rejuvenated their secondary. They brought back CJ Gardner-Johnson, who, I feel like he's more of an emotional leader on the field. I absolutely love what Philly's doing right now. And I hate to say it as a Cowboys fan, but they're dominating the draft in this division.
The Packers are on tilt. Cooper DeJean got taken out from under them. The Packers trade out of 41. The Saints do what the Saints do. They traded up, as they often they always trade up, right? And yesterday, did the Saints trade down yesterday? Was that the one time they broke the trend?
I think so.
Yeah, but they went back to their roots and they traded up. So yes, so now we're gonna have the Saints coming up here. But again, the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a big deal for them as they add 2 cornerbacks. And I have to believe the Eagles were ecstatic. I don't think there was any world where they thought they were getting Quinyon Mitchell in the 20s. And then to come back in the second round and to be able to get a cornerback many considered Cooper DeJean as a first-round guy. Obviously, their draft board was high. They were able to get their players without really sacrificing a lot. You mentioned Howie Roseman playing chess while the rest are playing checkers. Now, for fantasy, I don't know that this fixes the defense. But there are scenarios, like I said, if Slay is their third corner, if Bradberry moves to safety, that could start to piece together and fix some things. If Jordan Davis makes a jump in year 3, the linebackers are an issue. There's no question, and coverage especially. But they may have gotten significantly better. I was concerned their offense was only going to have to win shootout after shootout after shootout. Is this possible the defense could be back closer to average?
I think it'll take a couple of weeks, but I would say by mid-season, maybe November, when things start to matter, this defense could be humming. Because that
It's the New Orleans Saints per Joe Bartle. In that trade where they moved up, Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback out of Alabama. Obviously, the Saints have a lot of needs. Marshawn Lattimore, often injured, but for the most part, still a high-end corner. They got Paulson Adebo, Alante Taylor in there. But adding another corner, you need 3 corners in this league, if not 4. And adding McKinstry in there. McKinstry, in some people's mind, fell here. And that may be true. The question that I had asked was, Nick Saban always would play man with his corners. This past year, he played zone. And I wondered, is it because he didn't feel those corners were holding up? But the fact that Alabama is a defensive unit playing zone, we're able to contain. The corners may look better. And maybe I'm wrong on this. Maybe I'm wrong. But I am nervous that there was not the man concept that Saban loves. But that said, McKinstry's on the Saints.
I had McKinstry going somewhere in the back of the first round. So now here in the second round, all of this defensive value is starting to drop. And it doesn't shock me, Dennis Allen going to get a player to help bolster his defense here.
Yes, Dennis Allen is a very good defensive coach. And the funny thing with Dennis Allen is when they play an elite offense, you could tell he gets excited. He gets in the lab and he really cooks up some exotic stuff, but he doesn't bring that every week. And that's my issue with Dennis Allen. If he brought those great concepts week after week, they've had talent there. But it's like he's one of those like playing for the moment guys. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm overreacting, but I see that a lot. They come up with these game plans against good offenses. Like, wow, man, the Saints really balled out here. Not always the case. All right. So that said, nothing really offensively for fantasy here with that move, but the McKinstry move is a very solid move for the Saints defense to add to that corner room. But now we have the Houston Texans on the clock. Now, as we had talked earlier about, they lost a lot of defensive talent in the offseason. A lot of players. It was a very good group that was on the emerging side, but you lose that many pieces. They did bring some players in the offseason. Skill position players, they shouldn't have any needs. How are the Texans going to play this pick?
The glaring need defensive side of the football. They did a terrific job offensively, acquiring guys like Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs to really build around CJ Stroud. Now I think we're going to see, the head coach, DeMeco Ryans, get a little bit greedy here now, start building and bolstering this defensive unit because, I know that this AFC South is going to be competitive. But Houston has a legitimate shot with the right moves if CJ Stroud continues to progress to make a lot of noise in the AFC.
Bobby Slowick comes from the 49ers tree, and we really saw last year he was able to get Nico Collins schemed quickly into space. The wonderful things were done with Tank Dell. Tank Dell certainly did much on his own as well, bringing in Diggs, like you said. You mentioned Joe Mixon. They do have in their offensive line, they're set a tackle. Interior, Juice Scruggs is in there. They drafted him last year. And the other name of the guy who took over him at center evades me, but he played well last year. The only really hole is Kenyon Green. They drafted him a couple of years ago. He was hurt almost all of last year. As a rookie, he was terrible. But otherwise, the line is not bad. So this is going to be a very interesting draft to see if they just go defense, let DeMeco Ryans really cook something up. But you're right. This Houston Texan team has a very real chance if they continue with Bobby Slowick's offense to build. If Diggs can add another layer for them, this team could give a team like the Chiefs some trouble.
Yeah. I don't know if any true linebackers were taken. That could be a nice little fit, like a nice need filler if you can grab the best linebacker on the board.
The Houston Texans take cornerback Kamari Lassiter at 42. Now, I know they have Steven Nelson there. I believe he's still on the roster. They lost Javier Thomas, the slot corner, so that was a loss there. I don't know why the other corner's name's evading me. I apologize.
Okudah?
Maybe, but I think they had a holdover too. And I apologize for not knowing that name. Usually I know all the defensive players, but they did lose Javier Thomas. But regardless, we said you need at least 3 corners.
Yeah.
As we get to this, Jay Red did ask a question, confused why the Eagles picked another cornerback. Again, and Jay, it's a great question. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but I'll very quickly recap. Slay and Bradbury declined significantly last year, and it was a big problem for the defense. Like, obviously, the spine of their defense was bad too. But I do think, as we said earlier, now I think they draft 2 corners that should be starters. I do think Slay factors in now in 3 corner packages, which are frequent. You frequently play nickel. Often nickel is a base. And I think, I'm guesstimating here, but I could see Bradbury making a move to safety because he really lost the stuff. And he was the slower of their corners. Slay has a little better of a gear, but I do think they can make some moves to make that room. But I think the other corners they had, was Kelly Ringo a corner or is he a safety? They drafted last year. Can't remember which he was.
I believe it was I thought it was a corner.
Yeah, and Ringo could end up being a safety for them. So we'll see how that ends up going. But back to the Texans, adding a corner. Look, you're going to compete with Patrick Mahomes. If the things shake right for the Bengals, you're going to be competing. Jay Ringo was a corner. I do think they could transition him to safety as well, because remember, they had a lot of safety issues. Reed Blankenship simply is not good. He's listed in the starting lineup, and they also had Byard they picked up last year in a trade, but he's gone. So I do think they're going to have to start moving some corner piece to safety. And I think with these players, it'll give them some versatility. So, but again, Howie Roseman, it's going to be really hard to second guess him. Before we go to the Texans, any final word on that, Anthony?
Yeah, and also, you have your 2 youngest corners now on rookie deals, 4 years plus a 5th-year option. Corner's one of the higher paid positions. I believe in terms of average contract, it's 5th on the list. You just paid your wide receivers. You need to get cheaper somewhere.
Now, back to the Texans again. Kamari Lassiter, cornerback, and D'Amico Ryans. He likes his pressure packages. He needs corners that can hold up. They did lose Javier Thomas, so they did have a hole to fill there. He did play a lot of slot corner, and I don't know how they're going to manipulate and move the corners they have, but they do need corner depth there. And this is a team, they bring in Danielle Hunter, again, downgraded from Jonathan Greenard, but if they're going to bring up pressure schemes, they're going to need some corners to hold up on an island. And so investing in corner may be the way to get about that. And Anthony, hang on. The Arizona Cardinals go cornerback as well, Max Melton. So now we've had a run of 4 straight corners in this draft. Cooper DeJean, Kool-Aid McKinstry to the Saints, Kamari Lassiter to the Texans, and now Max Melton to the Cardinals. The Cardinals in the first round took Marvin Harrison at 4. They followed that up with Darius Robinson, I believe out of Missouri, as an edge. Now they had traded in this round because they traded out of the 2nd pick of this round and the 7th pick. They had multiple trades, but that said, they moved down to 11. I did screw up. It was a 2-3. They trade out of the 2-3. They have in the 3rd round, they have 3 picks, but trading back here, this is a team. They desperately need defensive help. Offensively, you got Kyler, you got Connor still for another year or 2 probably till he kind of fades off. You brought in Harrison. You drafted Michael Wilson last year. You have McBride. Is defense the way to go here and going with cornerback Max Melton?
Yeah, defense is certainly the way to go. Again, I like the Cardinals offense. Like they're not world beaters, but bringing in Harrison, that's a huge upgrade. And I think they have enough, right? Because the key is a healthy Kyler Murray. Defense is what they really need to click, right? Gannon, he had that record-setting defense a few years ago at Philly when they went to the Super Bowl. And they were loaded with talent. They need to load this defense up with talent and able to get the best out of Gannon. And this is what they should be doing, really, maybe for the rest of the draft. I would just continue to hammer defense. You were playing the division with the 49ers.
As bad as the Arizona defense was, they'll begin to make incremental progress if these draft picks hit. They're not going to fix it overnight. This is a multi-year fix, but this is a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
This is exactly what they need to do. We know up front, really, their front four is not good. Zaven Collins, who they transitioned from linebacker, Bilal Nichols, Justin Jones, and BJ Ojulari, really not good. Dennis Gardeck at linebacker, he overperformed early season sacks last year. He fell off. Kaiser White, hit or miss on him, really. And Mac was, so their front seven is a real problem. Again, they added an edge yesterday. At corner, they brought in Sean Murphy-Bunting, who did not play well last year for the Titans. So they really needed some corner help. They still have Budda Baker at safety. So all that said, they're starting to build.
Yeah, and I'm excited. Like, Gannon, I think he's a better coach than people gave him credit for initially making the jump to Philly. I know there were some videos going around of I think he's a good coach, and I like what they have in Arizona right now. I'm very bullish on this football team. Not now, but maybe a year from now.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Now, Kyler Murray, we mentioned earlier, 2 16-game seasons, then a 14, and 11 and 8. Now, the 11 and the 8, it's tricky because it was the ACL injury at the end of the 11-game season that made his following season 8-game season. So it was one injury that cost him 2 years. So it's almost like double jeopardy there. So I don't want to quite say he's injury problem yet because he does have 2 16-game seasons and that one injury that burned him. And he did have that injury 3 years ago. Where are you at with Kyler Murray now in his 6th year with a small size? You talked about that earlier. That was a player I forgot you mentioned. He hasn't held up well being slight of frame. What are your thoughts on the potential for durability for Kyler Murray?
Are we talking about in fantasy or just overall?
Either. Durability, because durability will be either.
Okay. It's becoming a larger concern year by year. But he was much more expensive when it comes to price point. Like he was starting to peak at like quarterback 5 off the board. Now I'm seeing Kyler go on underdog ADP right around QB 10. And I feel like there's enough risk baked into that ADP because if we get a full season out of Kyler Murray, he's going to finish much higher than QB 10.
I am going to be in on Kyler Murray this year. I don't know how heavily invested, but he is a player I'm going to be excited about. But more important, Joe Bartle sets us up again. The Las Vegas Raiders take Oregon center Jackson Powers Johnson. Many people had a first-round grade on him, but the center position, and it's become more trendy in the last decade to take a center in the first round, but there are so many good tackles. I think that's where the premium had fallen. So the Raiders do get a very nice addition here. And in terms of their line, they had Andre James at center. Not the worst in the world, but this is obviously a massive upgrade. The Colton Miller's our left tackle, but the rest of the line is in a bit of transition, and the Raiders do need to restock that line. And this is a very strong move toward doing that. Maybe Andre James moves to guard. That certainly is a possibility. You have Dylan Parham at 1, but they need to shuffle or need to get out. But this was an important thing because Antonio Pierce, the head coach, we already know that he wants to play defense and they want to run the ball. And if that's the case, then you're going to need offensive line help for Zamir White. And if somebody else comes in, I know Alexander Madison's there. I'm not really sold on him. Thoughts on the Raiders going offensive line?
I like the pick. Jackson Powers Johnson. One of my favorite parts, I love offensive linemen that can play multiple positions, and he's excelled playing all 3 interior offensive positions. So if they need to slide him in either guard position, they can obviously play center. He has that bulldog mentality, and I think it matches, as you said, Antonio Pierce and the type of attitude and the tone they want to set on this football team.
It's getting fast and furious here as we are moving through the second round. Joe Bartle again sets us up. The Green Bay Packers take, as Joe says, stud linebacker Edgerrin Cooper. And he says, bye-bye, Isaiah McDuffie. I love that, Joe Bartle. Great call. Yes, Edgerrin Cooper. Now, the Packers, they did have they lost Devondre Campbell in the offseason, to my recollection. I'm trying to look through. Yeah, they lost him. That was a big deal. And they definitely need to restock their linebacking core. The name's going to evade me, but they just drafted one a couple of years ago. And if you don't get the name, I will very quickly here. But that said, it is
Quay Walker.
Yes, Quay Walker. Now, Quay Walker's been a liability in coverage. That's been a problem, but they could maybe deploy him otherwise. But maybe Edgerrin Cooper adds to his group. The Packers did not need to worry about offense. Their offense is in very, very strong shape. They got rid of Joe Barry, the defensive coordinator, and now we just have to see if they're going to, in terms of offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, having Barry out. I know the playoffs are good, but that's a big move. And now they add a piece. Thoughts?
Yeah, the offense is going to be fine. That's going to hum as long as Jordan Love, the way he played last year, as long as that's real. Defensively, this team was a mess. And I get they, like you said, they played well in the playoffs, but they did not play well going into the playoffs. I think it was what they made Bryce Young look like a Pro Bowler last year, right? If I remember that correctly, like the Panthers lit up this defense. I was not impressed with this defense. I know they had some injuries, especially with Jair Alexander, but they need some help on that side of the football.
Bryce Young had 2 games over 16 fantasy points. 16 points. You're right. One of them was against the Packers. Yep. And that was his only, I believe, 300-yard game in that one. Now, I know it was a wild late comeback, but still, they gave that up. And there were it was like skills challenge. It was like the targets running across the field, and there was like nobody out there looking at it. So, yes, that was a bad unit, but they definitely, if the Packers can even get to like maybe the 20th defense in the league, if they can move up there with that offense, that would be a massive improvement for what this team could do. One player does not make the defense, but it's certainly a step in the right direction as they begin to address this. If the defense improves, and the Packers made a very good statement in the playoffs last year, is this a team that could push for the NFC Championship?
I mean, they came close last year, and nobody expected it. Now, I do think the league is going to be a little bit more ready for Green Bay and for Jordan Love, but this is still the NFC, right? Like, we love what the Eagles have done, but we don't trust their defense. The 49ers are still the 49ers, but are they going to take a step back? That can always happen. Detroit, are they for real? Or are they going to have, I know it's not a Super Bowl hangover, but are they going to have some type of a success hangover? So, yeah, the NFC is wide open. LaFleur's been there before, right? He's made a couple title games, I believe, with Aaron Rodgers. So it would not shock me whatsoever to see this Packers team again.
It's all about news from Joe Bartle. Joe Bartle tells us the Panthers have traded again. They trade up to the current pick, which is 46. They were at 52. They have traded 3 times prior in this draft. The Panthers are definitely shaking things up. I'm sure their owner, David Tepper, has definitely made some comments to the organization that he wants some fast results because we saw how quick he got rid of Frank Reich. Go ahead.
I'm not in love with the Panthers, and a lot of it starts and ends with the Bryce Young pick from last year. But they've had a pretty solid offseason, right? Like, it's not great that they had to move off of Brian Burns, right? Arguably one of maybe their best player, especially defensively. But they're starting to make some positive moves on both sides of the football. They're still a ways away. I still have question marks about their new head coach who they brought over from Tampa Bay. But, I'm starting.
My last prop went up in flames. Nobody cares. Joe Bartle points out the Panthers took Jonathan Brooks coming off an ACL injury. There are people in his camp for sure. Totally get it. I saw him as a rotational back, maybe an equal split committee back. He could do a little bit of everything. I definitely give him that. I don't think he's excellent at any one thing. Thoughts on Jonathan Brooks going to Chuba Hubbard's backfield?
Another good move, right? Because one of my biggest question marks was at the running back position. Miles Sanders was a big-time swing and miss in free agency. Chuba Hubbard's okay, nothing special. And if you really want to help Bryce Young out, it's more than just adding pass catchers. You need to be able to run the ball effectively and efficiency to take the pressure off this kid. So I love this pick in the second round. They need to improve that backfield.
Brooks goes 6 foot 216. Change of direction is very good for him for a bigger back. He is capable, obviously, when healthy, of making defenders miss. We hope the recovery from the ACL is full. He's not much of a route runner, but if you swing him the ball, he can get yardage after the catch. Again, not a natural receiver, which is why I see him as a rotational guy. That said, in terms of a running back, I didn't see him as a big-time tackle breaker, and I think you do need that. Pass protection I saw was okay for him, but at the second and third level, it wasn't anything special. There wasn't another gear to have there. Again, these are the things I think make him a rotational back, but Chuba Hubbard was definitely a volume-based play last year, and Anthony, we're going to come back to that in a second. The New York Giants select the first safety of the draft, Tyler Nubin. Again, pick 47. Let's go back to the Panthers for fantasy fallout. Chuba Hubbard was a double-digit PPR performer from week 10-ish forward. Volume was very, very favorable. Broken tackle rate was not good. Yards after contact were not good, but he had yards as a runner. He was used as a receiver, saw work at the goal line. Miles Sanders was only in when they were trailing, obvious passing downs, but it was Hubbard's backfield. But he is not a plus back. Assuming, which is an assumption at this point, Brooks is healthy enough to be ready week 1. How do you see the split in that backfield for fantasy?
This is a second round pick. This isn't like a day 3 pick for Carolina. This is a team that does have some needs, have some holes. They invested what I would call high draft capital at the running back position. If Brooks is healthy, I think he's opening the year. I don't want to say, who knows what the word running back starter means anymore, but I think he's going to see significant work out the gate.
Now, last year, the Panthers' offensive line struggled badly. Now, they had injuries on the interior. Bradley Bozeman is gone. Austin Corbett was hurt quite a bit on the interior. The outside, Ike Ekwonu, maybe not what we hoped he would be yet. Taylor Moton had been good in the past. He definitely slid last year. So we're not sure what we're getting out of this line. But that line, I had their run blocking graded D-. They were, again, not Giants or Jets bad, but they weren't far off from that. And therefore, this is not going to be a great line unless they can figure things out. Now, honestly, Jonathan Brooks and the Carolina Panthers may have done the Dallas Cowboys a favor here, because I didn't think that. I don't like. I know you like him more than I do. I wanted Dallas to go with the Florida State back, and I don't know why the name's evading me here. Trey Benson. I want to go with Trey Benson, and I thought that Brooks being more of a rotational guy, I think Benson getting downhill might behoove Dallas. So if they're looking for Brooks, now he's off the board. That said, let's go back to Brooks and Hubbard. In terms of drafting, I mean, right now we're going to assume health for Brooks, right? We're going to have to dig into this come Monday or Sunday and find out any updated reports we can find out or something the Panthers say. Where might you draft Brooks and or Hubbard?
I mean, considering this Panthers team, right? And you said Chuba Hubbard, double-digit PPR point performer down the stretch, but still played full 17. He's only missed 2 games in his career. RB 33 in fantasy points per game. This offense was not good, which is why he's only had about 5 touchdowns total. They're not going to be in the money zone a lot. So, I would rather draft Brooks. Hopefully, he comes at a little bit of a discount depending on how people value this backfield. Again, there's also Miles Sanders still lingering here. So people could see this 3-headed monster backfield and maybe fade all of them, which sends Brooks to a value. But when it's all said and done, I think they spent way too high of draft capital in a running back not to deploy him as the guy.
We are almost halfway through the second round. Pick 15. The New York Giants are on the clock. We said they took Tyler Nubin in the safety. So that was the last We have one more pick to finish the first half of the second round. So Tyler Nubin, safety. Really not a lot fantasy here. The Giants had a lot of needs defensively. We know that in the offseason, they lost Xavier McKinney, who was an outstanding safety. So this is their attempt to replace him, in my opinion. They did add Brian Birds via trade for the edge. Otherwise, Jalen Mills, better run safety, so better as a box safety. That would be it there. But they really didn't make any other adjustments or additions to the defense, so they did need to go with this here. So I think Nubin, again, the Xavier McKinney replacement. In terms of fantasy overall, I just don't think this makes anything to move the needle. But is there anything you'd like to say?
About what the Giants did? I think it's a smart move.
Yeah.
McKinney was a very good player and a very good loss. I actually love it for Green Bay for signing him. Giants.
Jacksonville Jaguars, again, Joe Bartle spotting us with the picks here. LSU defensive lineman Mason Smith, pick number 48. The Jaguars, look, there's a lot of things they got to get right here. They did take Brian Thomas in the first round, and the fact they believe in him, that's their guy. They're going to assume that he is going to be a big addition to their receiving room. We could say whatever we think about it, but it doesn't really matter. They invested there. They definitely need to invest in defense. By the time they picked here, probably the corners that they had listed high enough were gone, but they need help all over the place. They do have Josh Allen on the edge, but they do need interior help. There's a lot of help they need. I don't know the defensive line was the top of it, but that said, not the worst idea in the world. And actually, the picks are going to keep flying in fast and furious here, so we're going to continue on. Again, the Bengals are taking Michigan defensive tackle Chris Jenkins at 49. Now, this particular move, the Bengals lost DJ Reader, who was an outstanding run defender for their defensive line. So to me, this is a one-to-one replacement. But again, just like the Jaguars, unless these defensive tackles are going to be game changers, which I don't know that either of these are players that are going to be game wreckers, it makes me a little bit nervous because there are so many other things that I thought they needed. And Anthony, go ahead and step away from it. Take a break, and I'll continue on. So yeah, I'm a little, obviously you've got to fill those positions, and DJ Reader was a loss, and they did have to plug that in. But I mean, Chidobe Awuzie was not playing great for the Bengals last year. And again, they probably didn't have a corner here that they wanted to go with. I had 4 second-round graded corners. I think 3 of them are left, but that's me, right? And teams view their needs as they are. But again, I almost think in this draft right now, those are positions, they're not Super Bowl moves unless you're at that point, you're just needing to add a guy. And I think both the Jaguars and the Bengals, who both were below average defenses, and the Bengals for a while were bottoming out. And so I think realistically, these are not the moves that are going to get them to that average. They just need to be average. They don't have to be great defenses, because both of these teams are hoping to take their shot. The Jaguars are hoping to take a shot at the South, and the Texans are really arming up. Does Mason Smith for the Jaguars, does that really help them against Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell? Not so much. And then the Bengals, kind of the same deal. All right, they bring in Chris Jenkins. Is that really helping them to beat Patrick Mahomes? And sometimes I'm thinking it's that bigger vision that, obviously teams got to fill needs. I get it. But overall, not very excited about either the Jaguars or the Bengals picks. But we're fantasy guys too, so we always have that spin against us as well. So the Washington Commanders are going to be on the clock. Now, they've had been a very active team in terms of trades here, and we know that yesterday the Commanders added themselves Jaden Daniels. So there's, let me see, I did not date, and they did take Jerzon Newton, so they went to defensive tackle earlier in the second round. So they definitely had that. That was a very good infrastructure pick for that defense. In terms of what the Commanders would do here, again, if they have a tight end graded highly, I really do think they have McLaurin as Speedster, Jahan Dotson. I still believe in him, but I don't know how much the organization does. Last year was a weird year with Eric Bieniemy calling the offense and Sam Howell in there. So problematic there. But realistically, attacking zones might not be the easiest for them. And we talked about Zach Ertz earlier. And I said earlier, he hasn't been able to run. And then he had an ACL injury, and he could run even less after that. So I do think if they have a tight end drafted or that they see as a receiving threat, it would be a way to go. Also, a slot receiver would not be a bad idea because you have Jayden Daniels and you have to surround him with a little more than they currently have offensively. Brian Robinson is a nice interior back, but he's not a game changer. Austin Eckler is, he's still a good receiver. But again, how much is the mobile quarterback Jayden Daniels going to look to check down? And that's going to be an interesting scenario to see if those two even fit together. I always have worries that when the mobile quarterback, especially one like Jayden Daniels who can throw deep, when he's on the move, you're looking downfield. You're not looking to say, oh man, I want to get a 3-yard hitch to my running back. That's really not what the type of player I saw in Daniels. It's not what he's looking for. But there would be the intermediate level, the slot receiver or the tight end. But we'll see what the Commanders do here. And I hope I didn't call them the Redskins earlier. Sorry if I did. But anyway, the Commanders, we're going to see what they're going to do in terms of this. But I do think set your quarterback for success. I said earlier, he's 210 pounds, Jayden Daniels. And if he runs too much, he doesn't have easy outlets. You got to get him somebody that can get open against the zone, because if he just takes off and takes extra hits at 210, it's hard to say that's going to hold up. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go with that. Anthony, I was just talking about the Commanders who are now on the clock and saying that, a slot receiver or a tight end, because Jayden Daniels does look downfield when he's on the move, and they're going to need somebody in the middle of the field. They have McLaurin, they have Dotson, but they're going to need somebody that can get to that second and third level. And we'll see what they're going to do with their pick. But I really think it would be irresponsible to not give the rookie quarterback some help. Thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree here. You bring up Ertz. He's really a catch and fall player. We like McLaurin. We don't know. Dotson has that first round talent. He hasn't really panned out, but there was some news to come through. I don't know if you saw it. Darren Waller has officially retired.
Oh, wow. Let's take a moment. This is definitely a good moment to talk about. So Daniel Bellinger. Now, Daniel Jones, the quarterback. I get it. Daniel Bellinger, when pressed in action on light targets, is a competent receiver. I think he's better than competent. I think he's maybe slightly above average. Is Daniel Bellinger, does he crack the top 22 tight ends? You think he gets to the tight end 20, or is he going to be outside that?
Tight end 20 isn't too much to ask, considering how light this team is on pass catchers. And we know that there is already an existing rapport between Daniel Jones and Daniel Bellinger. So he could be a sleeper tight end.
In these two tight end leagues or best ball leagues, when you're drafting up to 3 of them, Bellinger might be worth a look for that reason. I don't know the offense will be ever where he's getting 7 targets, but that said, would they have Malik Neighbors as their alpha? Wan'Dale Robinson is going to be a big factor in the middle of the field, and that's where Bellinger plays. But that said, they're not always good. They're going to run some base sets as well. And when they do, Bellinger in the middle of the field could be a preferred option. And Brian Daboll is going to at least have the gravitational pull of Malik Neighbors. So Darren Waller having retired, again, that's the news Anthony Cervino told us. So Go ahead, Anthony.
No, I was just pulling a source. One of the sources is Bill Enright.
The Commanders do not give their young quarterback a weapon. Instead, defensive back out of Michigan, Mike Sainristil, number 50. Pick overall. So that said, this continues to move for the Commanders. We said earlier they took the Missouri defensive end yesterday. They took the defensive tackle out of Illinois, Jerzon Newton, earlier. So now they've invested 3 picks in the top 50 on their defense.
Again, none of this surprises me because of Dan Quinn and the fact that he needs to, that's his side of the football. And I think that, when you have this young rookie quarterback, you need to bail him out. He's going to make mistakes. And if he does make mistakes, I think Dan Quinn can bring a defense that we saw in Dallas. They were one of the best teams for a 2-3 year period at turning the football over.
So all that said, now the Commanders are definitely a player in this draft still. They have 3 picks in the 3rd round. I don't know if they dealt any of those out, okay, because they've been active in the trade market. But right now, and from, again, my notes before the draft, they had the 3rd, 14th, and 37th pick of the 3rd. It's more than 32 because all the comp picks come in that 3rd round. 3rd round gets very long because of that. But there is still plenty of time for them to give Jayden Daniels weapons if they're looking to do that. But let's go back to the primary point. Could they, if they believe in Jahan Dotson, do they maybe have enough with McLaurin, Dotson, and an aging Austin Eckler as a receiving back?
Do they have enough? Sure. It just depends on how much are they going to throw the football. Do they have enough to be a top 10 throwing team in the NFL? No. But, could they be do they have enough to be a balanced offense if they can get the ground game going a little bit with Brian Robinson? Yeah, I think so.
How do you view Brian Robinson? I see him as a fairly ordinary runner. He did have a couple. I remember there was a game against Kansas City, and there were a couple times earlier in the season he had a couple of explosive runs. But I see him more of like like the 3 yard in a cloud of dust guy. I don't see him as a game changer anyway. I just see him as like a general sustaining back with not a lot of upside. But how do you see him, Anthony?
I mean, he's not a game changer, but I think since he's been in the league, he's been a very solid running back.
Definitely.
Trustworthy on the goal line. He can move the chains. And you got to remember this, especially last year when he was the guy. He's one of the worst offensive that the offensive line couldn't block anybody. The passing attack with Jacoby Brissett and Howell was very erratic. So they can get some stability there. I don't think we've seen the best out of Brian Robinson yet.
When you mention that, and I'm going to go back to my old analysis, but it still holds water. If the Commanders are going to use Jaden Daniels with RPO concepts, the mobility of that quarterback, and I know I always talk about it, but it's important to remember this. When you have the mobile quarterback that scares defenses, whenever the RPO starts, the linebacker has to freeze, and the good running backs with that nanosecond of extra time, that's an eternity. That gets you an extra yard or two. Brian Robinson could benefit if the Commanders focus RPO based. So that's very interesting there. Now, Joe Bartels, the Colts are trading up to take this pick. But it's here. Let me just read. Let me actually. So Joe tells us the Steelers. All right, so then the Colts are going to be 52. The Steelers are taking West Virginia center Zach Frazier at 51. Now, if I remember correctly with the Steelers, they went tackle yesterday, Troy Fautanu. He was listed as a guard, but he's also listed as a tackle. So however they're going to use him, they got a big first-round lineman. They came back with a center, and we talked about this yesterday. The Rooney family, they want to run the ball and play defense. They have the 2 running backs, Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. They brought in Arthur Smith. Again, he did not adjust to late boxes, shooting gaps last year, and that's why the Falcons struggled. And I don't know that Smith fixes that, but Smith comes in, you want to run, the Rooneys want to run. Now you add 2 offensive linemen to a line that struggled. Thoughts?
No, a terrific move. And it's not you bring up the Rooney's want to run the football and play defense. That's Arthur Smith's MO. And if you're going to run the Arthur Smith offense, and I like Arthur Smith, the coordinator, better than the head coach, he's going to probably want to pound the rock with Najee Harris. And to get this really going, you need to have a good offensive line. I love the fact they added, 2 new probably offensive line starters in the first 2 days of the draft. Like these are smash moves for the way that this team's probably going to play football. Cannot depend on Russell Wilson to be the thrower he was in the past. But if you can get this ground game going, Russell still does the play action pass deep ball well. There could be some offensive fireworks in Pittsburgh.
Okay, so we do need to talk fantasy for the running. Let's talk the running backs for a minute. We got Najee and we got Jaylen Warren. I contend that Jaylen Warren benefited from Najee being the early down grinder. And we talk about Zeke and Tony Pollard is the same way. We go back 20 years. And the change of pace back, who's the faster back, defenses they're playing at the speed of the starter. And so they clean up. I do think that holds again this year. But with the addition of offensive line help, knowing that Arthur Smith's going to commit to the run, going back to the idea he kept using zone. Zone runs are not working aside from the elite running games. They're not working against the light boxes the way they're shooting gaps. So is Arthur Smith going to be creative enough to find a way through? But that said, how are you going to value Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren now that they have help on the line?
When you look at ADP, underdog, Najee 24 off the board at running back, Jaylen Warren 26. These guys are close, but to me, I'm going to overvalue Najee Harris. We know this guy can handle volume. Go back to, I believe, his rookie year. He was a volume workhorse producer in fantasy football. And we know what Arthur Smith does. I think this could be a rejuvenation year for Najee Harris. I think he fits the Arthur Smith game plan better than Jaylen Warren does.
When I'm looking at the numbers from Najee Harris last year, and I did remember he was scoring 15 PPR points in a good number of his games from week 7 on. It was the majority of his games. He did have a little rough stretch in weeks 14 and 15 against the Patriots and the Colts, but otherwise he was bordering on nearly 15 points. And then in week 17 and 18, he scored 24 fantasy points in each of those. So that was interesting, but we have very important news coming up. At pick number 52, the Indianapolis Colts select AD Adonai Mitchell out of Texas. Now, this is interesting. I do think Adonai Mitchell could become an X receiver, but I think starting out, it may be best for you to be a little more possession guy, but Michael Pittman is a very weird receiver in a good way. He's an X, but he's also a great underneath guy. So Adonai Mitchell maybe needed to stretch the field. It's going to be messy, I think. I think it's going to be a little messy to figure out the fantasy fallout. Is Pittman going to continue to heavily dominate targets? Big frame to catch. He's proven in that system to be very reliable. Mitchell comes in. Is he going to work his way in over time? How are you breaking down this receiver room?
They paid Michael Pittman to be the guy, and Pittman broke out last year in year one of Steichen's offense, performing with, small sample size with Anthony Richardson, but really playing well with Gardner Minshew, which shocked a lot of people. Downs is nice. Pierce is nice, but Mitchell could be that game changer lining up opposite Michael Pittman to really put this over the top. They still have Jonathan Taylor. They still have the skill set of Anthony Richardson. Now you put Mitchell here. This again, I keep scaling back to how talented this AFC South can be. This Colts could be a really dangerous team. Like, we're gushing over Houston. Don't sleep on the Colts.
Shane Steichen, we said earlier, he runs the offense, and it's a masterpiece most weeks. Last year, what surprised me about the Colts, they started the season with 6 tight ends and 4 wide receivers in the roster. They came out in 3 receiver sets as their base. Their roster did not indicate they had the ability to do that, yet they did. Now, assuming Steichen is going to continue to go 3 receiver sets, they will walk out in their base offense. Richardson under center, Jonathan Taylor behind him, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs in the slot, AD Adonai Mitchell on the other outside. This, as you said, could be a dangerous group. On the offensive line, Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly, 2 years ago, they took a step back. They were back to pretty much normal. Braden Smith, right tackle, has been fine. Bernard Raymond at the left tackle, on and off, but not a liability. So overall, this offense is potentially one, if Richardson can show and build on the little bit he showed us last year. As you said, Anthony, this could be extremely dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in the event Richardson is an injury-prone quarterback, because that's also within the range of outcomes, Gardner Minshew's gone, can we rely on Joe Flacco? Because when you're drafting Colts skill position players, you have to think about, well, what if my quarterback goes down? Is this going to be a situation like with the Jets and they're just in dire strait? Or do you think we can get another, run of good Joe Flacco that we saw last year for fantasy? I think we have to think about that when we're drafting Colts players because of Anthony Richardson and the way he plays quarterback.
So when you mention Joe Flacco, we have to ask, why was he successful last year? Well, what the Browns did was they immediately changed their offense for him. They got it out very quickly. They ditched a lot of the play action, the slower developing plays. Their line was all beat up. They had so many injuries in that line. And basically they had Cooper and they had Njoku. And basically Flacco would get it out quickly. Now, given the line in Indy, it's better than the state of the line that Flacco was with. And in terms of skill positions, look, Amari Cooper in my mind is better than what is on the Colts, but it's not a far drop off. But the ancillary receivers are way better than the Cedric Tillmans and the Elijah Moores of the world. And of course, David Njoku is there, but there's that. But I do think with Shane Steichen will coach to who he has. And I do think Joe Flacco could be very successful. Again, a little better protected, but Steichen will make it a point that Flacco gets it out quickly. And we saw Flacco still has that arm strength. Thoughts on that?
I'm going to draft Colts skill position players, primarily Michael Pittman. Like the fact that he played that well with Gardner Minshew, and I like Gardner Minshew, but he's still Gardner Minshew. I have a lot of hope that Michael Pittman is a borderline elite receiver. So yeah, whether it is Richardson or if we did have to see Joe Flacco, I'm going to be really bullish on targeting Michael Pittman.
So Michael Pittman, I was getting him in my drafts. He was falling like wide receiver 19, and I couldn't figure out why. What is this going to do to his ADP? Is he going to fall further? Because he was being disrespected in drafts, and I didn't understand why. Because what he showed us last year was like, well, this is clearly PPR leagues. Somebody can pile up points. Mitchell's in there. Downs is healthy this year. He was really struggled with a knee. He played through it most of the time. You're bullish on Pittman like I am. Where are we drafting Pittman?
I think if Mitchell was drafted earlier and he was more of a day one pick, I think people would be a little bit more, he might have a shot to be a 1B here to Michael Pittman, but he was a day two pick for a reason. This is still, I anticipate, not the most volume in the world, and I feel like to follow the money in the contract, Pittman should be the guy, de facto.
Joe Bartle again sets us up. The Washington Commanders pick 53, 21st pick in the second round. Ben Sinnott, tight end, Kansas State. We talked about this, Anthony, probably 5 to 10 minutes ago when the Commanders were either on the clock or preparing for something or maybe a trade. But that said, we said Jaden Daniels is going to need somebody either in the slot or at tight end. Ben Sinnott is more of the receiving type tight end. He would be the one that would work in the seam. So that said, they had Zach Ertz and they still have him. John Bates probably is the blocking tight end. Ben Sinnott will probably have training camp to see if he can get past Ertz. If not, it could be a deal where Ertz starts the season. And then like last year, Trey McBride took over. It could be a similar situation there. But what are your thoughts on Ben Sinnott giving potentially Jaden Daniels in middle of the field help?
Nice landing spot because there is a somewhat immediate path to production, right? Like look what happened with Ertz and McBride, as you brought up. Ertz is now a year older. He's going to be a good locker room presence, good leader, a good coach for Sinnott. And eventually this is going to be his tight end room, right? He should, second round pick, he should certainly overtake Bates. And then we also have that rookie quarterback. And we love the narrative that, hey, the best friend of a rookie quarterback or young experienced quarterback is a tight end. So I don't know what's going to happen early. Like, I don't know if I'm drafting Sinnott in fantasy.
Yes.
But I'll take my shots on him, certainly in Dynasty and maybe even deeper best ball leagues.
Exactly correct. Dynasty, yes, because this is a player that could grow with the quarterback. And when you're taking 3 quarterbacks in a tight end league, yes, because after the bye week start, Sinnott maybe into the rotation, but they are going, the Washington Commanders, they're going into the middle of the field presence. And right now, Jamison Crowder, A, he doesn't stay healthy. B, he's obviously much past his best years. De'Ami Brown, we haven't really seen much from him. There is a clear opportunity in a league of zone defense to be able to get production there. So I do think if you're drafting a third tight end in best ball drafts, that I do think, like Anthony, Ben Sinnott is a player. Now, you had a question I'm going to put up here for you from William Stevenson. He asked if you're curious if McConkey to the Chargers or the Rams, the Chargers, changes your dynasty opinion on Justin Herbert from earlier today.
I'm kind of out on Herbert, and sure, getting McConkey is a positive, and it's going to help Justin Herbert and his fantasy value, but I'm still low on him because of the coach. We know the type of football Harbaugh wants to play, and certainly the type of football, the type of offense that Greg Roman calls.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And look, I think we both like Lad McConkey, and he could do a lot of things, but there's an injury history there. We don't know what the durability will be like. I don't think we're thinking this is Cooper Kupp. I think we're thinking this is a very good slot receiver, but this is not Amon-Ra St. Brown, but this is a very good slot receiver. But I don't think he's a game changer if other pieces around him are added. Maybe a little bit better, but you're right. I don't think this makes a tangible increase on Justin Herbert's value. I think that's as usual, a very astute point there.
Plus, like, even let's say McConkey is great. Well, the other guys around him needs to be great, and neither one of us love Palmer, and certainly not Johnston. So that just means they'll play coverage on him.
So back to the Commanders, we talked about Ben Sinnott coming in. This shouldn't have zero impact on Terry McLaurin or Jahan Dotson's value. That's a different position. They play the outside receivers. We got an interior tight end here. But Jayden Daniels, does this do anything for Jayden Daniels, or are we still keeping him where we were before the addition of Sinnott? Does it move the needle at all?
No, this is not a needle moving play. At least, not early on.
Yeah, no, agreed. So Jayden Daniels, I will be happy to draft him right around quarterback 17-ish because of the ability to run. I think we got something more coming down the pike here. The Cleveland Browns finally on the clock after not having a draft pick yesterday. They take Ohio State Buckeyes defensive tackle Mike Hull at pick 54. And we're down like just at the last 10 picks of the second round. It is going fast here. So that said, now the Browns, we talked earlier about teams taking defensive tackles. It was both, I believe, the Bengals. I don't remember the other team, but I was saying maybe luxury picks, but for the Browns, maybe not so much. The Browns offense, they did not need to invest in skill positions. They drafted Cedric Tillman last year. They got Cooper. They got Njoku. We'll see what Watson brings to the table. Nick Chubb's supposed to be back. The offensive line should be healthier, but defensively, they've got three good corners. They've got Myles Garrett. They've got help from Dalvin Tomlinson, and they've got Zadarius Smith. So I do think this is a team that could continue to bolster that defensive line and make life very difficult for opposing offenses. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, they lost Clowney this offseason as well. So there was certainly a need there. And the Browns, right, like they were a very competitive football team despite musical chairs at quarterback. That, a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, especially defense. So it's a matter of, can their quarterback stay healthy and play? The last time we saw Deshaun Watson was the game he got hurt. It was also the best game that he played all season. Can we get that version of Deshaun Watson? Can Nick Chubb give us anything close to the player he was coming off yet another knee injury? And if that's the case, if the offense starts working, I think there's enough juice on defense to make this a very tough out for a lot of football teams.
Yeah, now the Browns didn't have a first-round pick. They just picked the defensive tackle. Now they'll pick about the same spot in the third round. They don't have a fourth, so they'll have one more pick before the later rounds to make things happen. That pick will be tonight, so that's a positive as this team continues to build infrastructure. Like you said, Anthony, we're very hopeful that we see some version of Nick Chubb that's close to what we had, and that is going to be very important. But if they can get Chubb anything close, it could be really exciting. This team, Jim Schwartz calling the defense, able to get pressure without sacrificing blitzing. Myles Garrett was playing dinged up down the stretch last year. I believe it was a shoulder, if I remember right. And it was underreported. At first they reported, and then he was practicing. They took him off the injury report. He was not himself. And we saw Houston take the Browns apart in the playoff game. The corners had no chance. Well, the quick pressure of Myles Garrett was not there down the stretch. And I think that had a cascade effect on the other pass rushers because teams realize when a player is not right, and they were able to slow down the other players, and that really hurt them. But a healthy Myles Garrett with more help, the Browns, again, are a strong playoff contender. Final thoughts on the Browns?
Tough division they play in. Obviously, you got Pittsburgh, who looks like an up-and-comer. Yeah, Baltimore there as well. The Browns, they're always going to be in it. But again, the big thing is Deshaun Watson. It's always going to be Deshaun Watson. And what the Browns paid to acquire Deshaun Watson is always going to be hanging over their head. They need to justify that move.
Realistically, if they got league average play out of Deshaun Watson, and if Nick Chubb is at least somewhat back to normal. They don't need Watson to be a superstar. If somehow he can find a way to get back to top 10 for him, and I'm not predicting that, okay?
Yeah.
But if he somehow finds a way, if that happens, that's a big if. This becomes a very dangerous team. They had a Jerry Jeudy in a trade too. Should have brought that up earlier.
Yes.
That's important. See, Elijah Moore, they got him 104 targets last year. Elijah Moore was horrible after the catch. Like he was a negative, like 20th percentile. Jerry Jeudy, he may not have done many things right in Denver. He was like 86, top of my head, yards after the catch. He could scoot after the catch. And that's what they needed out of that position that Elijah Moore was in. And that hurt them. But Jeudy, that's his specialty. So Amari Cooper will be the ace and Joku will still be involved. But having that outlet that can run after the catch, Jerry Jeudy's in a good spot. Thoughts?
Yeah, I was never a big time Jeudy guy, but was he ever in the position to succeed? I think he's in a lot better spot here to succeed with Cleveland. The biggest question I have about this offense is what do we do with David Njoku? He's coming off of a career year, but they did bring in Jerry Jeudy, and Njoku flourished when he was getting peppered with targets from Flacco. How are we valuing or devaluing Njoku?
So it's a great question, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. I've cited them on a number of different shows, but I was doing the per game. The numbers, like you said, per game with Flacco, it turned Njoku when those games, other than the first game when he did a 0 for 0, every other game after, he was like probably the tight end one. But with Watson, he was middling. He ended up with, like, I'm going to tell you how many targets. I believe it was 100 targets in Njoku ended up. I'm looking at it right now. He had 123 targets. And he was probably more on the 75 target pace while he was with Deshaun Watson. And I think that's what we see. I think it was more the 75 pace. People that might be drafting him like maybe on 100 targets. I just don't think that's happening, especially if Jerry Jeudy is even somewhat decent for them. Drew, the Miami Dolphins take Houston offensive tackle Patrick Paul, and this is important for the Dolphins. You've got to keep Tua upright. Last year, they did a very nice job of that. Tua didn't take any hits to the head. We're very grateful for that. I want that young man to be healthy. But, he was able to avoid head injuries. But Teron Armstead is always on the injury report, missing games, and it's very important. And we know that they lost interior lineman Robert Hunt, who is a very good blocker. This is obviously an edge player, but all that said, it's a big addition for the offensive line. Not sure how good Patrick Paul will be, but it's definitely an investment for this offense and Tua Tagovailoa that needed to be made. Anthony?
Yeah, I actually really like this move from Miami. If you're going to invest in Tua and he's your quarterback long term, just like you said, you need to be able to protect him not only this year but long term. And how much longer, as you alluded to, is Teron Armstead going to play at a high level? So this is a nice move where you're going to pay Tua. You're going to have potentially your left tackle on a rookie deal for the next 5 years. So, and this is a team that we saw them shed a lot of cap space this offseason. They need to start making more moves like this.
There's no doubt. Now, Dallas Cowboys are on the clock here, so I know Anthony Cervino will be very, very excited about this pick. I do want to talk about, what? I think we could probably push the Miami because I don't think this necessarily tangibly affected anybody's fantasy value on the offense. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Cowboys are up. We know that they have 2 third-round picks. They picked 9th and they picked 24th in the 3rd, but right now they're 24th. They did take Tyler Guyton, the offensive tackle, in the 1st round. Are they going to get that running back that they desperately need, or are they going to count on Zeke coming back and taking care of business?
The more I read, the more I see it is really close between Dallas and Zeke. I just don't know, even if they bring him back, is that enough? So if I'm Dallas, I'm probably taking a running back. But the more I think about it, depending on how they value it, would not shock me at all for them to also draft a center here.
Tyler Biadasz left, and he was adequate. He never was what they thought he would be. Obviously, Tyron Smith is with the Jets now, but he missed time, and it was just he had to go, unfortunately. But what a great career he had. So, the Dallas offensive line is in a bit of transition. They do have Zach Martin, 34, I believe, Anthony, maybe 34 years old.
Yes.
He's up there in age. And then, of course, we still have, help me on the other lineman. Terrence Steele still there?
Yeah, they have Steele, Zach Martin, Tyler Smith.
Tyler Smith, yeah, left tackle now. And Tyler Smith really stepped up well when he had to go in for Tyron Smith, and he can play that left tackle. So that was really a big – go ahead.
And it's like Guyton's already penciled in as a starter, and at center, Brock Hoffman, who I don't know a ton about. So, again, the center is either going to be addressed, I believe, today or in the third round or tonight.
So do you think that Guyton and Tyler Smith are the tackles? Now, I believe when Tyler Smith came in the league, he was a guard, correct? Yeah. So are they moving him back to guard? Terrence Steele's trustworthy enough. He's not dominant, but he's trustworthy enough. Do you think they – or do they because you really want to put your best five out there. Is that going to be moving Tyler Smith back to guard?
It depends because, like I said, Guyton can also do what Smith does and play guard or tackle. Terrence Steele's on the right side; he's fine. You obviously have Zach Martin at right guard, and Tyler Smith. He started the year as a guard. When Tyron got hurt, they kicked him out to left tackle. So I think it all depends on how Guyton plays and looks in camp for them to make that decision. But I do foresee Guyton starting out the gate.
I am excited for this pick to come in, though, because, my guy is Trey Benson. A lot of people like other running backs here. Who is a running back you would like to see end up on the Dallas Cowboys if they go that route? They may not.
I did like Brooks. I wouldn't mind Wright or Benson here, though.
Some people like Blake Corum out on him.
I'm not a big Corum guy. He was cashing a lot of touchdown props with Michigan, but, different story here in the NFL.
Jalen Wright, to me, a little more of a fast, speedy change of pace back. Maybe a little Tony Pollard-ish. Not saying he's Tony Pollard. Not really a comp, but just in terms of style of faster running play. Would you like more of a power? Would you like the power back? You know what? It's not really going to matter here because we are going to give the pick here. Joe Bartle on the spot again. He gives us Western Michigan edge defender Marshawn Kneeland goes to the Cowboys at pick 56. Anthony, it's your Cowboys. Talk it out.
They go defense here a little bit deflating because they do have some offensive needs still. But it's never a bad decision to go with an edge rusher. They did lose, as I said earlier, Dorrance Armstrong to Washington, so they do need that rotational piece. Micah Parsons, they exercised the 50-year option. I don't think he's going anywhere. They're going to extend him long-term, but DeMarcus Lawrence is getting a little bit up there. So I don't hate the pick. It's probably a smart pick. And in Dallas, they draft edge rushers well, and they draft offensive linemen well. And those are the two positions they've drafted with their first two picks in 2024.
Being that they spent the Cowboys a second-round pick to get their edge rusher, is it going to be moving Micah Parsons all over the place and getting all three on the field? Or do you think it's going to be a fact of that Kneeland is going to come in and kind of give Marcus Lawrence a blow and then, maybe rotate it out? What are your initial thoughts?
Maybe this is going to be a move to get Micah Parsons some rest. And the reason why I say that, if you watched Cowboys games last year, there was a lot of games at the end of the season, in the postseason, it didn't even look like he was playing.
Trevon Diggs expected back. I don't remember when the knee injury was. How early in the season was that?
I don't remember the date, but it was early. It was because it was just a massive blow to that secondary.
So optimistic there, and they still have Deron Bland and Jordan Lewis, not world beaters, but Stephon Gilmore is gone. Safety of Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson still, but they definitely need to add a little bit of help here. But they definitely did struggle down the stretch as the Green Bay Packers.
October 25th.
Okay, yeah, so he should be in good shape there. So again, the Dallas Cowboys go Marshawn Kneeland with the edge defending position. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are coming up on the clock here, and the Buccaneers, they took tackle Graham Barton. He was listed at different positions depending on the outlet you looked at, but should work in and be an anchor offensive lineman for them. The Buccaneers did need line help. I'm trying to think if they took a second player. Did they take one? No, they didn't win earlier today, so we should be good there. But in terms of this pick, Buccaneers they signed Mike Evans to a contract. They have Chris Godwin still. Running back, it's Rachaad White, and then much after that, Chase Edmonds and Sean Tucker was no good last year. Yeah. Cade Otton, the tight end, they're good with Baker at quarterback. Where might the Bucs go here?
This probably should be a defensive side of the ball pick, possibly a corner, maybe even a linebacker.
He didn't play well last year, but Carlton Davis is gone, and obviously
Yeah.
that is a blow.
Yep.
Jamel Dean is still there. Dean struggled on and off last year. We say that cornerback play is not always sticky year to year. Shaq Barrett, their edge rusher, he didn't ever come close to that season he had, but he was still a very good pass rusher. He's gone.
Yep.
Devin White. Look, Devin White, he was a liability in a lot of ways. He was a big name draft pick. But you know what? We have the pick in, so let's get this going. And Joe Bartle on the spot telling us the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Chris Braswell, the edge from Alabama. And that is going to be their Shaq Barrett replacement, assuming.
Yeah, that Tampa's defense, right, it was always carrying them. And I think despite the nice play out of Baker Mayfield, they need to rebuild this defense and make it a strength and not a liability of this football team, right? They still have a defensive head coach in Todd Bowles. So, yeah, it makes sense for them to start replenishing these assets that are either aging or no longer there.
I mean, they had Kalijah Cansey, who they brought in the summer. I can't remember which year, but recently, and he did show some signs. But Logan Hall's on the other end, so they do play 3-4. So my guess is he's going to line up on the outside at Joe Tryon, Shoyinka, Yaya Diaby. Nothing special yet, but they definitely need to address the edge here. So Braswell should give them the opportunity to get some pass rush they're going to need. Still have Vita Vea anchoring the nose tackle, but again, this is a defense in transition. They have the star in Antoine Winfield at safety. But again, this is a unit that definitely needs some help, and you really don't want Baker Mayfield in a bunch of shootouts. That is not the optimal way to approach things, because ultimately he did take a lot of hits last year, although the protection was good. Later in the season, teams started bringing a little more heat, so they're going to need to make a little bit of a move defensively. Still going forward for the Bucs in this draft, they do have multiple third-round picks, 26 and 29. Do you think they're going to address that running back position for an early down runner?
I don't know if it happens tonight. I think they will dress running back, but probably early, maybe 4th round, 5th round.
We know the coaching staff loves Rachaad White. He's a good receiving back, but like I said, now the offensive line the interior line was not good at run blocking, didn't do him favors. But I say Rachaad White has broken tackle rate and yards after contact as a runner were terrible. They were a little better than his rookie year, but they still were below the 25th percentile. So it was not good at all. And so the best thing would be get Rachaad White in more of a receiving role, give him some carries for sure, but definitely go with that. And while we continue on. Joe Bartle tells us the Green Bay Packers get their safety, Javon Bullard, pick number 58. So the Packers had added safety Xavier McKinney. Now Javon Bullard. Safeties are very important in today's NFL. Obviously, you got a box safety, you got a coverage safety, but teams would like to sometimes rotate in 3 safeties when they can't do it. If you have the ability roster-wise, but realistically in today's NFL, the safety position is one that can really help cover within the zone. So we see some teams leveraging safeties well. It also gives you that ability to use some coverage skills when teams are putting extra receivers on the field. But the Packers, again, we talked earlier, they have now made. Again, that offseason move of McKinney was huge. They added a tackle in the first round. Thoughts on the Packers going defense with safety here?
I'm hypercritical on this Green Bay Packers defense and how it played last season. And if you're going to make some noise in the NFC, you have to be able to not only create turnovers, but, stall drives out. And, McKinney, certainly a player. And now here in the second round, Green Bay brings probably an immediate starter onto this football team on the back end.
And earlier in the round, remember the Packers in the middle of the round, 13th pick, they added Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker. So this team has made 2 big additions to their defense. And again, I'll repeat, Xavier McKinney was a great offseason ad from the Giants, strong, super safety. So this really helps them. They still have Kenny Clark up front. They do have Quay Walker. They're hoping he emerges into more than what he was. But again, he struggles in coverage for sure. cornerback room. We'll have to see what goes on, but they still have corners that can play a bit there. So this could be a very opportunistic move. Offensively, from a fantasy standpoint, again, I really nothing here. But again, I want to counter with one important point, Anthony Cervino. Joe Barry's gone. They bring in some defensive talent. If this defense goes from being bottom 5 to being top 20, top 18, remember, Matt LaFleur does not want his quarterback throwing 579 times like last year. Aaron Rodgers, it was normally in the 520s. There was a balanced offense. It was not pass heavy. It was take your shots. And Jordan Love, if that happens defensively, we could see his pass attempts go down significantly, because if Aaron Rodgers wasn't throwing the ball that many times, why would they ever do that with the Jordan Love? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, they also brought in a volume running back like Josh Jacobs, who can handle a workload. But realistically, how high are we drafting Jordan Love anyway? Even if the passing attempts were there, and we have to remember all the quarterbacks who were hurt last year. So Jordan Love might have had a nice fantasy finish overall, but this was a year where Mahomes had a little bit of a setback because of the pieces around him. Joe Burrow was hurt. Lamar, a couple of guys missed time. Now I'm drawing about Anthony Richardson missed some time. Well, so how high are we really on drafting Jordan Love?
I mean, Jordan Love was going as the quarterback 9 in most drafts. Yeah. And really, what's behind him, right? Justin Herbert, no thank you. Kyler Murray, though, I'm interested in Kyler, right? Brock Purdy, maybe, it's kind of similar. I don't know that one is better than the other. It's going to be really close there, right? And then Tua, don't know if he can hold up, but his numbers were garbage down the stretch. And then we got Trevor Lawrence, Jared Goff. So
I got Cousins.
You know what?
Quarterback 17.
Yeah. Cousins is forgotten. And Cousins is a player if his ADP stays where it's at, you and I, unless we're in different leagues, we're going to be fighting over him. Because
him and then Aaron, I'm an Aaron Rodgers guy. With those weapons, Aaron's buried at the QB 20. I would probably take Aaron Rodgers over Jordan Love on that Jets offense. They're going to throw the football. And you got to remember who Nathaniel Hackett's there. He's going to let Aaron do what he wants to do.
But was Hackett on the staff with LaFleur that held Rodgers to the 520 attempts a year?
But didn't Aaron Rodgers have a big year with Hackett, though?
There was a high efficiency year. Yeah, it was low attempts, but it was like 40 touchdowns, right? He went through the roof.
I'm looking it up now.
Yeah, and while you're looking that up, as we continue to talk on this, Jordan Love's attempts will likely be lower, but I want to go back to the Kirk Cousins. When you're looking this up, Kirk Cousins, look, we got the Rams offensive philosophy and Zach Robinson in there. Drake London was criminally underused. You and I both think Darnell Mooney is way better than is given credit for. The Bears was not a functional situation. Rondale Moore's just a piece. He's going to be a mode, but Kyle Pitts is there. You could throw to Bijan, but I think it's going to be a pass. There's a Ram-style offense. Yeah. They're going to throw. And I think Kirk Cousins, again, the Achilles, that saps explosiveness. I think with another 4 months to heal, I think Kirk Cousins is going to be back to that 4,400-yard range, maybe even a little more than that. I think we're looking at 33 touchdowns or so. I really think he's a top 8 quarterback, but he's being drafted way outside the top 12. Quick thoughts?
No, I'm all in on Cousins. And yeah, despite no rushing floor like we like to talk about, Cousins has everything else we already know he can produce as a top 10 to 12 fantasy quarterback, and he's being buried, a QB 17? What did I say?
17, yes.
Yeah.
Did you find the Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. He threw 48 touchdown passes on 526 passing attempts. Then he followed that up with 37 on 531.
My gosh. And think about that. That was the year, wasn't that one of the years that Robert Tonyan had like 50 targets, but he caught like most of them, and he had like 10 touchdowns. That was one of the most efficient seasons I ever saw from a tight end. And of course, we know that wasn't repeated.
Yeah. Now, Tanya's in Chicago now.
Yeah. Now he's a number 3 in Chicago. Yeah. Isn't that funny how you could have that year, just have that magical year, but it really was Aaron Rodgers, of course. Right. Yeah. All right. We have a pick on the clock here. So, the Hughes, I didn't play the music. Sorry, guys. Do that. With the 27th pick in the second round, The Houston Texans take Blake Fisher, offensive tackle out of Notre Dame. They have Titus Howard. They have Jeremy Tunsil. But you know what? Can you ever have enough depth on an offensive line?
No, you can't. And Tunsil's been around for a little while. And should something happen to Tunsil, it's always good to have depth. Go ask the New York Jets how important that offensive line depth is and keep your quarterback upright. It's funny, not funny. It's true. And I do like this move for Houston.
Absolutely. Because look, right now, they've got 3 very good receivers, if not excellent receivers, maybe great receivers. And they have CJ Stroud at quarterback, and they got Joe Mixon in the backfield. Realistically, they were not going to go skill position, but to shore up that offensive line, that is a big deal. All right. Joe Bartle back on the case. The Buffalo Bills at pick 28 of the second round, 60 overall, go with safety Cole Bishop, and that makes sense because Jordan Poyer is no longer with the team. So they had lost a lot of defensive pieces, and Sean McDermott's a defensive coach, and it was something they absolutely had to address. Anthony Cervino.
Yeah, smart move by Buffalo. They get their wide receiver. Now they come back and get a new starting safety for, again, this is a defense that was completely gutted this offseason. They need to get younger, and they need to start replenishing some of this talent.
Absolutely. So no, this is a very good choice. Again, McDermott's a defensive coach, and I know they have offensive needs on this team. That is to be certain. But that said, they have to be able to compete defensively. And they early in the second round, remember, they got the receiver. They had a Keon Coleman. I think he's a little more of a possession guy, but he's a big target, and it definitely gives them some size they needed because they had Shakir and they had Curtis Samuel. And we know Mac Hollins is there, but really situational deep threat. But they did need a sturdy chain mover. I wanted an X, but again, a lot of people are really high on Keon Coleman, and those, if people are right, then that's going to be the jackpot. But as we said, a little bit of defensive work for the Buffalo Bills. We are down to the last 4 picks. Of course, we're down to the last 4 teams in the NFL playoffs. We got the Lions, the Ravens, the 49ers, and the Chiefs. So these will be very interesting picks as, again, the 4 conference championship teams are on the clock. As we get into these last 4 picks, thoughts, Anthony?
I did want to scale back to Tunsil that pick by Houston. Tunsil's been around 8 years. He's 29 years old. He's only played 1 season fully. So he's missed games in literally every season but one, which was back in 2022. And there's a big, hefty contract involved here. So I actually really like this move now that I dug into this a little bit more.
You're right. Durability, a tackle is very important. And again, CJ Stroud, his protection is paramount. And you draft in the second round, so you got 4 years of tackle play. Very, very critical move for what this organization is going to be. Because, like I said, if their quarterback's getting hit, that's a problem that they don't need to have, especially one that's one they could deal with. And Titus Howard on the other side has been a very solid tackle for them, so we can expect a little more of that. So with the Lions on the clock here, are we going to continue to see them going the defensive route here? Offensively, I cannot see them needing skill position. Their offensive line, they did lose Jonah Jackson. Jonah Jackson slipped a little bit last year. He wasn't playing at that same elite level. Obviously, replacing him is still going to be an important point, but I don't think it's one that's going to be something they have to do. All that said, Joe Bartle is giving us some intel. And the Detroit Lions select corner Ennis Rakestraw. So they continue to go yesterday, Terrion Arnold at cornerback. Today, Ennis Rakestraw. So they've gone 2 corners. And last year, if you remember, Anthony, I know they tried, there's one guy they added and he missed the whole season with a knee injury. And then I think he got arrested in the offseason. I can't remember what player that was, but they didn't have him. So that was a bit of a problem. Now the Lions acquired Carlton Davis from the Buccaneers in free agency, but Carlton Davis really slipped last year. But that doesn't mean he's not going to be good. They have Emmanuel Mosley, who was injured a lot as well. So we'll see how that shakes out. But all that said, they've added 2 more corners. If they can get something out of Davis, something out of Mosley, but they have 2 more corners. What does this move tell you about the Lions for this year?
This is the Lions attacking what I believe their biggest need, which was the defensive backfield. It was a liability for them last year. They can rush the passer. They played some sound defense, but they really need to find a way to create more turnovers and really lock down enemy wide receivers. So this is great. And I think you're talking about maybe Mike Hilton.
That was one of them, but they added somebody else, and he got into legal trouble. Yeah, and he's like out of the league now. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't remember. No, good call on that though. Regardless, so that said, the Lions again moving on defense. That's what they have to do. This is a team that they really feel they can compete for a Super Bowl. That defense, if they could have gotten any defense against the 49ers, it's a good chance they would have been sitting in the Super Bowl, and certainly that didn't happen. And so they are definitely looking to correct this, and they have the flexibility roster-wise to be able to make these moves. So this is a great opportunity. Now, the Ravens are on the clock next, and they did go corner. They went with Nate Wiggins out of Clemson yesterday, which is a great move. They still have Marlon Humphrey and Brandon Stevens. So that said, this is a team they're going to look to lock down with the corners. Marlon Humphrey occasionally gets nicked up, so there's that. But otherwise, we know that they lost Patrick Queen, which he was better because of Roquan Smith, but they're going to have to figure out how to get that downhill attacker. We'll see what happens with that. Where do you think they go here? They have Matabike. They brought him. I think they gave him either an extension or a franchise tag, I believe. So where might they go here?
If you're Baltimore, how do you not go offensive line, considering they traded away Moses? I believe they lost both starting guards in free agency, and I think Stanley is even entering a contract year.
You're right. They lost John Simpson. They lost Kevin Zeitler. Zeitler played well. Yeah. And so they lost 60% of their offensive line. And so this is a team that we know that they've always had that ability to have a good offensive line. And they brought in Derrick Henry. And, we know that they have the mobile quarterback RPO with Lamar Jackson, which is going to help Henry. But boy, you bring in Henry and now you lose 60% of your line. Like you said, they keep the best two pieces, Linderbaum at center and Stanley. But at some point, you think they're going to want to address this. This is something that the Ravens would do. And actually, we have news that Anthony Cervino is going to sound like this. As I was saying, Anthony Cervino sounds like the smart man he is. As Joe Bartle tells us, the Ravens select tackle Roger Rosengarten. So, Anthony, good call on that. They definitely go with the tackle. That should give them somebody opposite of Ronnie Stanley. Patrick McCarry was more of a swing lineman, in my opinion, for them anyway. So, this is definitely a move where they should get that other tackle. Definitely helps the offense. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, I like it for Baltimore. It's a very Baltimore Ravens pick, and you have to think ahead not only to these immediate losses, but again, Stanley, I believe, is a free agent next year. And, do you want to pay him, or if this guy works out, you might have your new starting left tackle moving forward.
We are down to 2 picks left in the second round. The 49ers, remember, they took Ricky Pearsall yesterday. Now, the buzz for much of the day was Ricky Pearsall's a slot. Deebo Samuel's a slot. So the talk shifted from Brandon Ayuk possibly getting traded to Deebo Samuel getting traded. And then the news came out, maybe the Commanders, maybe the Patriots, nothing. So as of right now, I don't see the 49ers dealing away Deebo or Ayuk for a third round or later pick. That would not be good value. So my guess is they're going with the Avengers again this year, which really hurts Ricky Pearsall because obviously what is he going to be doing at all? Because with those guys in the field, there's Jawan Jennings is a great blocker, very integral to what they do. So Pearsall right now is an injury replacement, and that's about it. Thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Now, there's always a long shot that a trade, for Deebo Samuel, assuming he would be the one who's out, that could be facilitated at any time. But it looks like you're right. They're going to retain their top pass catchers from last year. So, like, Purcell's probably a guy to look at for the future because I do think this upcoming offseason, they can't keep everybody, and a move will be coming.
Absolutely. Now, Joe Bartle points out this time last year, 11 skill positions went off the board in the second round. This year, just 6. That could have to do with the incredible run. Well, there were 7 receivers in the first round. There were 6 quarterbacks taken. The running back classes here, we have 1 off the board. And I would be very surprised if the 49ers took one. Is there a world where the Chiefs take one? Possibly. because Pacheco runs very violently. He had 2 surgeries at the end of his first year. Last year, he missed 2 games with a surgery to his shoulder, but I doubt it. So with the lack of running, and I think the tight end class was light too. Ben Sinnott, I thought, was maybe a stretch for the second round. So I think Joe Bartle asked a great question, but the quarterbacks dried up. The tight ends and the running backs, they really didn't have many options. So I think it came down to the fact there were receivers and not much else. What say you, Anthony?
In terms of who the 49ers can take?
No, I'm sorry. Why Joe's question about why there were only 6 skill position players taken in the second round this year as opposed to 11 last year.
I just feel like there was so much leftover defensive talent from the first round. Like, to me, there's no other explanation. When we get to the second round, there was a run of what 5 or 7 cornerbacks taken consecutively.
Yeah, that was beautiful, and it was something that we don't usually see. But a trade. Ian Rappaport says it's a trade. The Chiefs are on the move again. So the Chiefs apparently traded 1 spot up with the 49ers. Why would the Chiefs, unless there's a world where they're keeping the last 2 picks, which I don't know that yet. If Joe Bartle finds out, he'll let us know that. And but that said, why would the Chiefs trade up 1 pick unless they're keeping both?
Maybe there's 2 guys that they want.
I'm still waiting. Rappaport says if I can find anything further from Rappaport, because this is kind of important. But if they just moved up 1 spot, nothing else of other than all Rappaport says there was a trade. They're on the clock, so we'll have to see how that shakes off. I'm sure we'll figure this out soon, and then we'll find out who's on the clock very quickly after. So the Chiefs, what are they going? They moved up 1 spot, Joseph, which means that the 49ers then are picking left. So it's a pick swap, which it won't cost them much. They may get a 6th or 7th round pick for that. That's probably all they had to pay up for that. It wouldn't be more than that. But what would the Chiefs see on the board that they really, really need that they think the 49ers might have taken? It's the only reason you jump.
They have similar needs, right? Corner and offensive line. So maybe the Chiefs are just trying to get ahead and make sure they get their guy, whoever that might be.
Wow. Interesting. 1 spot. Well, I'm going to be very anxious to see what this pick comes out to be as we move here. And here. So, and there it is. Let me put the... The Chiefs traded up to take tackle.
There it is.
Yeah, Suamataia is the last name. So that was one I didn't necessarily study a lot, so I don't really quite know, but it is a tackle. It is a position of need. Like you said, Anthony Cervino, the 49ers have Trent Williams, but they also have Colton McKivitz on the other side, and he was a turnstile last year. So it could have been the Chiefs were worried that this tackle was going to go with them. Now, Joe Bartle tells us the Niners moved up higher in the 5th, while the Chiefs get a 6th from that 1 pick spot. So it was so the 49ers were able to move up some. So it was like it's a very small price to pay. And that was the 49ers. While we're waiting for the 49ers pick, and we were talking about Ricky Pearsall earlier, is if Debo stays and obviously Ayuk stays, Pearsall's a non-factor this year, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. They still have Juwan Jennings, who we saw his role increase a little bit in crucial situations in the playoffs.
So that said, the Pearsall deal, we'll see how that goes. I do think it was obvious the 49ers were expecting a deal to be made. It didn't materialize. Now we have to worry there's going to be some acrimony in-house too. And we also, so Pearsall's opportunity is if Ayuk says, I'm not playing. They don't have much leverage. If the team plays hardball, the player doesn't really have leverage in the situation. But we've seen it happen before. So all that said, Pearsall's going to need somebody not to be there. Otherwise, that's going to be a problem. And the 49ers, I guess, as a team, really, they've got to beat the Chiefs. That's got to be their goal. And if they don't trade one of those receivers, the Pearsall move does not help them beat the 49ers. Thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And this could be a move looking ahead because I do anticipate, like I said, trading one of these receivers at some point. But if you're trying to beat San Francisco, if you go meet them in a Super Bowl, Pearsall sitting on your bench isn't a wise move. It's almost like Atlanta and Penix. If you're trying to beat the 49ers in a title game, Penix sitting on your bench isn't going to help you.
Now, and you don't make a trade for this scenario, but Debo does have the extensive injury history. So if they were to have Debo play and miss time, they would luck into a player, not Debo's level, but they would move into a competent slot receiver to at least help get Ayuk and Kittle more targets. So that could not have been their intention. So again, we'll see how this all shakes out. We'll see if the 49ers end up figuring something out with these players. My guess is they do. They're not going to pay Purdy for one more year. They're going to have to figure something out. But it sounds like long term they can't keep all these guys.
Also, like, what is Debo Samuel's value? Like, you can make a case, okay, maybe a 1. You're not getting a 1 or a 2 for Debo Samuel. So I don't know if that deal necessarily has to get done yesterday or today. There's still day 3 of the draft where, hey, we'll give you something today and maybe a third or a second next year.
Exactly. So this is going to be interesting to see where all this shakes out. Very, very interesting. But Debo, you're right. Brandon Ayuk, and I know people who play fantasy, I don't think a lot of people really know what he is. He gets open at a ridiculous level, better than Keon Allen, best in the league at getting open quickly. There were anyway, we have the pick in. So let's get this done. And the San Francisco 49ers, last pick of the second round, cornerback Renardo Green. Second round is over. 49ers go cornerback. Again, very important position. The 49ers have Charvarius Ward. Diamador Lenoir is very up and down, and they really need somebody to push Lenoir. Lenoir has good games, but there are times where he just doesn't show up. Now, at safety, the 49ers should get Hufanga back from the injury from last year, which will be very, very helpful to them. That was a massive loss. Dre Greenlaw, linebacker, tore the Achilles in the playoffs, so I don't know what his stats can be. But adding a corner, especially up front when you have Nick Bosa and then, Drake Jackson, Leonard Floyd on the other side, Yetur Gross-Matos came in, but definitely want to bolster the corner room. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, I don't fear the 49ers secondary. So it makes all the sense in the world to go, it's almost like Detroit. Make your weakness better. Terrific front seven in San Francisco, nice linebackers, but that secondary at times was a liability. I forgot, was it Averett who stepped up and Lenoir?
Correct.
I believe, and made some plays, but they were also giving up some plays.
And that's the whole point, right? You need that consistency. You need somebody with a better baseline, and that's what they didn't have. All right, second round is in the books. Heavy on defense. We got offensive linemen in a very deep offensive line class. It wasn't the big offensive skill position bonanza. We had one running back go off the board, and that was to the Carolina Panthers. And remind me who that was. It was Jonathan Brooks. And so there was that. One tight end, Ben Sinnott, no quarterbacks, obviously, because 6 went yesterday. We finally had Adonai Mitchell go off the board. At the beginning of the round, we saw the Buffalo Bills take Keon Coleman, who they believe to be their guy. Jaylen Polk went to the New England Patriots. What are your overall thoughts on round 2?
Interesting second round. Again, very defensive heavy because of how offensive heavy yesterday was. And there was a lot of nice defensive talent left over here. So in terms of fantasy, the player that sticks out the most is not only you got McConkey, but for me, I'm very interested in how Jonathan Brooks will fare in Carolina.
My takeaway is just the realization of seeing the depth of this draft, that these 2 rounds, there were very good players still going in the late second round, better than I thought over the years. I just really feel that a lot of teams were able to address some potential needs. And I do think this is going to be a very impactful draft class at those particular positions. Not a big linebacker class, not a big running back class, other than Bowers, not a big tight end class, but in some of these cornerstone positions, corner and tackle. This is going to be a difference-making class. It's going to be very important for the league. All that said, RotoWire will have SiriusXM Channel 87 Saturday and Sunday, 1 to 3 Eastern. Anthony and I won't be on, but they'll have other RotoWire guys, so you can catch coverage there. Anthony and I will be back Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern. We will recap the winners and the losers of the draft. Anthony, final words on our draft coverage.
Now, this has been terrific so far, and can't wait to wrap it up on Sunday when we recap the whole thing.
we would stay longer. I have about 40 hours of hosting shows this week.
Yeah.
I am toast, so we have to tap out, unfortunately. Everybody who hung with us, thank you. Keep up with the coverage. You can find me at Jim Coventry NFL. You can find Anthony at The Real NFL Guru. Anthony Cervino, great work as always. Look forward to working with you in the very near future, my friend.
Absolutely, man. You too.
Thanks. Good night, everybody. Enjoy round 3.